We just really want everyone to realize and participate intentionally, being a part of an area that's very important in our society today. Race relations. We need to focus on that because if you really think about it, if you look around at each other, we're about 30 to 50 generations cousins. So shake a hand with the person next to you because you're all related. We just found out we're brother and sister from another mother. So at the end of the day, we sometimes have a little levity, but this is a serious day. Anytime you wake up in the morning and you're breathing, it's a good thing, but we need to go so much further in this area of race relations. So I welcome you. Give yourselves a hand for getting up and getting here on time. As you may know, the BLAAC organization is helping leaders, change makers, and achieve racial equality, racial equity, through dialogue, unity, and shared values. We all have a lot of shared values. We have more in common than I think than not. And I believe we should continue to evolve and explore and express that. At Black Leaders and Alliances Collaborative, we bring individuals, organizations, and local leaders together to work towards and achieve the vision of a unified, equitable, and equal society. So that is our goal today. Thank you for coming. I now want to introduce my co-MC for the day. Yeah, let's give him a hand. He's the pastor of All Things New Church in Monterey. I've been there, it's awesome. He sings, he plays, he's a magician. He's a surfer. I used to be, but I stopped after hitting a really bad wave. He's a father and he's a husband. But most of all, he's a human being that really believes in all of us, evolving and getting to the next stage, having those unspoken conversations about what we don't know about each other so that we find out and then learn from that. So on this note, I'm going to turn it over to him for a moment. This is Justin Nosworthy.
So my co-MC, sister to my left here, is Jacqueline C. Simon. Jacqueline is the president of JCS Ventures, Consultant Group LLC. She is the vice president of North County Fire Protection District, the chair of the DWMC Inclusion and Diversity Committee. She is a writer, she is a singer in some very specific contexts. She is basically when no one else is there, she said, she's a writer of a soon-to-be published book, The Unspoken Conversation. What a great title that is. So mark your calendars for her conference next year, same room, same time. Yes, my name is Justin. I'm pastor of All Things New Church in Monterey. I serve also on the board for Black Leaders and Allies Collaborative. It is an honor to be here and be a part of this conversation. So thank you all for being here. And right now it is my honor to introduce Seaside Mayor Ian Oglesby, a prolific community servant with a rich history of serving in a wide variety of capacities, who will now offer greetings and a welcome to the city of Seaside. Mayor Oglesby.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. All right, there you go. It's a beautiful day. I think someone said earlier, if you woke up today, it's a wonderful day. If you made it all the way down here, it's a beautiful day indeed. Right? I want to say good morning on behalf of the residents of Seaside. It's a pleasure and an honor that I stand before you today as mayor of Seaside. One of the most, if not the most diverse community in this county, let alone the region. On behalf of our entire community, I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you to the Race Relations Summit. And thanks to the host, the BLAAC Leaders and Allies Collaborative for bringing us together today, and the founder executive director, Derek Williams, for his leadership in this space, particularly in this area that's needed. So we want to thank him for that. Today we're gathered not only to listen to extraordinary individuals who have dedicated themselves to the cause of a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive society. We must emphasize the power and the need for collaboration and unity in our collective pursuits of the social justice. It's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And when we talk about this collaborative, I can tell you equity is not just right around the corner. So going fast is not going to get you there. But going together, we can be there. Recognizing these challenges we face are not isolated to our individual communities, I want to say welcome to our friends from throughout the county and maybe a little bit further than Monterey County limits. Highlighting the importance of forming a strong local and regional collaborative of social leaders like yourself, we cannot be overstated. That can't be overstated as we come together. By joining forces and fostering connections, we can build a better and deeper foundation, a foundation comprising several generations. When you look around the room, you see a little people a little older than you, see some a little younger than you, but the object of today is to impact the society and the lives of our children's children. That's what we're here today for. We may not see the fruits of our labor, but that apple seed will one day be enjoyed by someone else as an apple. Several generations have advocated upon which we can network, collaborate, and ultimately end racism from within our midst. Furthermore, united in efforts to increase social equality for all, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We must work to leave no community behind. As we know, and as we see in the headlines of today, sometimes we're taking 2 steps forward and we're taking 50 years of steps backwards. By standing alone, we are weak. By standing together, we are stronger, shoulder to shoulder, with a shared vision of a better future for our children. Our mission is clear: to create a county where diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just aspirations or empty phrase words, but a lived reality for our county residents. Thank you. Let us seize this opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to the cause, to strengthen our social justice organizations, and to amplify the voices of those marginalized for far too long. Together we can pave the way for a society that celebrates the richness of its diversity and ensure that every individual, regardless of his or her background, has an equal chance to thrive. Once again, I extend my deepest gratitude for each and every one of you for your service and dedication to a more perfect union. Your presence today fills us with hope, inspiration, and a renewed determination as we move forward and share our thoughts. As you know, your future action speaks louder than words. So we can talk all day that we want, but it's your actions that are really going to move the needle. Again, welcome to a gathering that signifies the beginning of a transformational journey towards a brighter, more inclusive future. Welcome to the BLAAC Leaders and Allies Collaborative Race Relations Summit. Thank you.
Sand City's first ever female mayor and first ever mayor with Indigenous heritage, Mayor Marianne Carbone, who will guide us through a time of land acknowledgement, respectfully honoring the Indigenous people and their influence on this place.
So good morning and welcome. Before I do go into the land acknowledgement, I just would like to say Mayor Oglesby mentioned 7th generations, and you know, our ancestors have been standing behind us, and now is the time. The time is getting near. Things are getting better. So with that, I will go ahead and give my acknowledgement. Haku, Lagu Washets, K. Matika Marianne Carbone, K. Tik Francis Kika Chioni, Kashan Chimash Kiskan, Waslikmu Soknokmu Akun Seaside Oyo Oyo. Good morning. How are you? My name is Marianne Carbone, and my mother is Frances Chioni. We grew up in Seaside, just down the street here, at 505 Francis Street, where Seaside named that street after my mom. Our home stood where Laguna Grande Park is, and my family is of Chumash descent from the island of Lamu, and that would be the Channel Islands, and the ancient village of Soktonokmu. My ancestors migrated to this area and lived here amongst the Esalen, Costanoan, and Ohlone for generations. As you heard, I am Sand City's first female Indigenous woman mayor, and I believe in California. I'm a community leader, culture bearer, and it's an honor to be with you here today. At this time, I wish to acknowledge the first people of the land, the Esalen and their ancestors, and those who inhabited and cared for this land for eons. I ask that whenever you're here, whether it's to work, visit, or play, to please remember and acknowledge the first peoples of this beautiful land, as we only have one mother, the one who gives us shelter and sustains us with nourishment. It is good to give her thanks and to treat her with respect. I will offer up a blessing to honor Creator, Mother Earth, the ancestors in the 4 directions. I'm making it a little short today because I know today's going to be a very busy day. And to everyone, we're all related, my brothers and sisters, as we journey together through the circle of life together. Ke Elasal, this is a Chumash prayer. Ke Nano He Elape, Kutye Kutkeo Muku, Nuna Alawe, Ka Alasal, Ka Oxhiel Elape, Ka Oxhiel Su, Ka Oxhiel Swabman, Ka Ox Kilikil Elape, Kilikil Su, Kilikil Swatman, Kilikul Unku, Kahonta Kil Elasal. This is our prayer in English. Our grandfather above, you see me and you see the people. You bring the moon and the sun. We love the sky, the land, and the ocean. You watch over the heavens. You watch over the ocean. You watch over the people. We believe and so we pray. May Creator bless each and every one of you being here today and guide you with open hearts and knowledge that you're about to receive. I was given a little note to everyone here just to remember that there are a few different tribes here in the area. They're nonprofits and always looking for help in some way in donations. So I wanted to name a couple of the tribes, and that would be, number 1 would be the Esalen tribe of Monterey Bay. We have with us here Canyon, Sayers Ruth, and she's with Indian Canyon Nation, Costanoan Indian Research. Canyon, if you can stand. And also I am working with some cousins, Pajaro Valley Ohlone Indian Council, and with them we also we raise funds to bring programs such as Red Dress Day regarding the missing, murdered indigenous people, and try and bring that here locally to the community. So different cultural events and that. So with that, thank you very much, and enjoy your morning and afternoon. It's a lot to learn. Thank you.
So it is, again, my honor to introduce Derek Williams. And Derek Williams is the visionary behind today, bringing together a variety of people from our community, people who lead in a variety of contexts to serve and bring this community closer to the moral arc of the universe, which of course Dr. King reminds us is long but bends toward justice. Derek Williams is a licensed and ordained minister, a life coach, business developer, public speaker, published author, an amazing golfer. He wrote this, I don't know. Derek has served several nonprofits over the years, is the developer and facilitator of the Eurocentric Cultural Reflectionism course. He's the founder of Talk to Me TV, holds many accolades of achievement in the realm of leadership and leadership development. Derek is a native of Civic Grove, a longtime resident of Seaside, over 40 years, and one of 8 children, and is the driving force behind today's gathering at Monterey County's Race Relationships Summit meeting, and a personal hero of mine, Derek Williams.
Well, I think I'll start by saying I haven't been called a hero since my son was 5 years old. Thanks, Justin. Before I say anything, I actually want to say thank you to Justin and Jacqueline for taking the time of being here to usher us through this day. Thank you very much. Mayor Oversby, thank you to the city of Seaside for your support and you being here. Mayor Ramon, thank you very much for bringing us to recognize this. There are a couple of things, a couple of people I want to say thank you to before we go any further. First of all, to the volunteers that are here today, from Jacob's team before. If you guys are here, you're wearing very similar shirts, raise your hands, please. They've all selfishly given their time and energy to make this a reality. So thank you to the Jacobs team. To the people, I've worked with a lot of people in making this a reality. But 2 people come to mind who answered every call, and sometimes they said no, but they answered every call. But I want to say thank you publicly and from heartfelt, from my heart, say thank you to both Veronica Delaney and And if you are on the board of directors for Black Community Allies Collaborative, please raise your hand. I have some board directors here. Thank you, the board. As tough as it can be, really are nice people leading us in the right direction. Now, while I'm here also, I could not go any further without saying thank you to our sponsors, Salinas Valley Health. This would not be possible literally without their support. So thank you, Salinas Valley Health. The Community Foundation to give me a little bit of guidance and actually how to approach grants correctly. But they've been a huge help and wonderful support to the Community Foundation as well. Thank you very much. Monterey Bay Aquarium, have new friends, strong friends. If you don't know who they are, keep your ears posted. These are people who are moving and making a difference in this county in a way I've never seen anybody do before. Thank you very much for your support. Monterey Bay Economic Partners. Okay, I don't want to scare you away right now, but I'll tell you, inside of the introduction that Justin gave you, he told you that I was a pastor preacher. So, anyway, we'll move on. Just know that's true. I can't hear. It's hard to hear me back there. Okay, is that better? Thank you. So the reason why we're here today, this is why I'm here, to give you a couple of opening statements about why we're here. There's something I learned over the years that is fundamental to all things, and it's a very simple statement. It is that everything happens in relationship. Everything happens in relationship. And although we may be standing here trying to change and make things different in regards to race relations, sometimes we get more focused on race than we do relations. Sometimes we try to mechanicalize and dictate behavior so that we can mimic what it is that we're truly trying to achieve. The reason why I wanted to bring everybody together today was because of an old thing I learned through John Maxwell, one of my pastoral mentors. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. And I think you all know that because you are our county leaders. You know when the trouble comes, it falls on you. And when the good things happen, you may not get the accolades, but that falls on you as well too. You take the brunt of everything that happens, and oftentimes are not, well, that's even well acknowledged for what you do. So one of the things we want to do today is we want to back off your desk and recognize the human being that sits behind it. It's relationship that makes the difference. Policies and procedures, statistics can do a lot of things for us, give us a lot of information. But the reality is, if I don't like you, those policies and procedures only become a task for me to do so that I can benefit myself rather than my purpose. Today, what I would like to do is something very different than what we normally do. Normally we would come together, we would get more statistics, more data, more information. We'd go into breakout rooms and talk about what we need to talk about, come back and have all this wonderful information. But the thing that really needs to happen, in my humble opinion, is that we need to sit in front of each other. We need to humanize the communication and conversation of racism, of disparities. We need to recognize that the person across from me is equally created as I am, and that person deserves equally the same love, respect, honor, opportunity that I have respect, that I deserve. So we're doing something a little bit different. Dr. Lehman Wallace says in one of his videos, rhetorical question he asked, what is the hope of diversity? And the answer is that we might get to know each other. It's pretty simple. That we might get to know each other. I think it's time for us as a people, across the board, to stop telling people what to do and how to act. And begin to speak to people about who they are and who they can become. I think we can do things a little bit differently while using the information that we've gained in the past and the information we'll gain in the future, but applying it from a different vantage point, looking at it from a different perspective. Relationship. Everything happens in relationship. The greatest leaders that I've ever known, the greatest leaders that I've ever worked with, the greatest leaders I've ever read, were the ones that stepped on the other side of the desk and sat down and talked to the people that walked into the room. The greatest leaders I ever met were the ones that served human first, and policy set. The greatest leaders I've ever met were the ones that could show and bear the human emotion to the other human and empathize with whatever challenge they may be facing. So today, we were going to do more in regards to relationship, which is the foundation for all things that we will do from this day forward. We're going to try to give you leaders a break from the task of having to answer all those calls all the time. And maybe now let your hair down a little bit and talk to somebody and just meet and maybe share some of the burdens. Part of why we're here also with the CEOs or the nonprofits that are outside is to be able to build new bridges, new relationships, to find ways of communicating within our community, for our community, from our community, for the citizens that live here. I've seen over the years many times when organizations have reached outside Monterey County, into LA, San Francisco, Oakland, to fix issues here in Monterey. While I know of organizations here that were equally as qualified, that never had the opportunity to fix what's in their own backyard. One of the reasons why we have the CBOs here is that we would be able, hopefully we will be able to meet across the table, shake hands, and find out who's who. Your resources as leaders are here in this room. And we want to make that available to you. Not from a way of crisis, but just in a way of relationship and communication. We want Monterey County to fix Monterey County. We want it to come from the heart, from the people. We want to empower not only the CBOs, but we want to empower and share the burdens with the leaders. We want to show up and make a difference. There are 2 points two stories I want to talk about. Mayor Oglesby mentioned something about generations. And over Memorial Day weekend, I went up to the Alameda County and visited with my granddaughter and her husband and her daughter. Yes, so we can make her child. But something happened while we were in Alameda, and my granddaughter was directing my great-granddaughter in the ways of behavior. And as I listened to her, it echoed things that I told my children. And it was all based on the color of their skin and how they need to behave in public and this, that, and the other. And then it just dawned on me. These were the lessons that my mother told me that my grandmother told her. In that moment, I've got 6 generations. 6 generations molded by what and for what. And when I hear people say, well, things are getting better, one thing I think is, why isn't it best now? Why do I have to wait for somebody to dictate how I can live my life to the best of my ability? 6 generations being molded, and we don't even know we're doing it. Excuse me, but from my table, my desk, my family, my household, it stops now. And the only way I can do that is by putting myself in the way and saying to all of you, how can I help you make a difference? I think this is one way to do it. The reason why we're here today, as leaders, citizens, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, what good is it to have the right to sit at a counter if you cannot afford to buy a hamburger? Ladies and gentlemen, half the dream has been achieved. Look around you. This is the counter. We are all sitting together now. We are all sitting together in a place where we could not sit before. The reason why we're here is to ensure that everybody gets a hamburger. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Derek, for the challenge to lean into relationship, engaging with one another in meaningful ways. I once heard it said that there have been societies without the wheel, but there has never once been a society without stories. And our next speaker, our keynote speaker, Dr. Carol Lynn McKibben, is someone who has done some deep dives into the stories of our past, the past of our community, joining many others in uncovering truths vital for our path forward together. Dr. Carol Lynn McKibben is an Organization of American Historians Distinguished Lecturer. She served as the director of the Seaside History Project from 2005 to 2012. She is the author of several books on display and for sale in the lobby, right out there. Her most recent work, Salinas, The History of Race and Resilience in an Agricultural City, tells the story of community building and struggle in a multiracial city. Dr. McKibben has been teaching courses in California history, urban history, and immigration history for the Department of History and Urban Studies at Stanford University since 2006, and is currently an affiliate lecturer with the Bill Lane Center for the American. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker, Dr. Carol Lynn McKibben.
Thank you, Derek, for inviting me here today, and Justin for your kind introduction, to talk about the historical roots of diversity and racism for this important summit meeting on race. It's truly an honor and a privilege to offer some of the context about the demographic history of this area and the challenges that we face in the present day. I begin by emphasizing that history does not follow a linear progression in which we constantly improve upon what happened before. Instead, by knowing our history, we not only work at not repeating our past mistakes. That's okay. But also understanding that there have been models in the past worth paying attention to and emulating. History is not inevitable. It is deliberately constructed and purposeful, and I want to be mindful of that throughout this conversation. So to that end, I'm going to focus today on the incredible human diversity that always characterized Monterey County, and for that matter, California itself, reaching back for thousands of years. In fact, California was and is one of the most diverse demographically on the planet. I will equally focus on the important historical actors who played pivotal roles as change makers throughout our history, teaching us both resilience and courage in challenging the racism that's so deeply embedded in American life and inspiring us to keep doing the same. So let's start by looking at California, as it was centuries ago. We are a blip in time compared to that, and California history certainly did not begin in 1850 with statehood. Far from it. For thousands of years, First Peoples, who numbered about 300,000 in the state, lived throughout California in hundreds of small communities that were culturally and geographically distinct. They spoke something like 78 separate languages, which is more than all European languages combined, and far more than in any comparatively sized region in the world. Today, the federal government recognizes over 109 California tribes. This is by far than any other state in the nation and includes the Costanoan, Esselen, Ohlone people along the Central Coast, and the Salinans, that the lettuce curtain in Salinas Valley, divided. We need to remind ourselves that their descendants are still living with us. Indigenous people lived harsh lives in California, but unlike ourselves, pretty sustainable lives within their varied environments for thousands of years, despite the droughts and fires and floods and extreme weather that were always part of California's environment, which challenged them just as they challenge us, even before this added pressure of climate change. What First Peoples did not face was infectious disease. That began with European contact. So there is a point of change here, that a road not taken, that was deliberately taken. contact with Europeans happened sometime in the 16th century, when Spanish explorers who were joined by Filipinos encountered Southern California's Chumash people. So Filipinos have been part of California's past long before the 20th century migrations we're a little more familiar with. The interactions between First Peoples and Europeans were sporadic at that time, with First People using representatives from a wide variety of European countries and the United States for their own purposes, for trade, to gain wealth, or just to gain power over their neighbors. It was more of a balance of power in those days between all of these multiple groups, with Native people usually holding the upper hand in that power dynamic. So that was a turning point. But even those sporadic encounters, so they were hit and miss, brought disease to First People that reduced and weakened their populations significantly. Unlike variations in weather, contagious disease was not a normal part, was not any part of their lives, and they had absolutely no immunity to anything whatsoever. They died by the thousands. Still, for almost 200 years thereafter, little changed in terms of California's demographic makeup. That is until Spanish colonizers arrived in the 1770s and founded a system of missions and presidios to claim California as a Spanish colony. That is the first instance of change that we define as real and racist harm. Irreparable injury to First Peoples that was only going to get worse with the advent of American settlement 100 years later. Spaniards' cattle and grazing animals quickly decimated the environment, causing starvation among the indigenous groups, who were then forced into missions out of sheer desperation. They were treated violently, both by Catholic priests and military personnel stationed there. Women were routinely raped, children and men were brutally beaten and killed. They died by the thousands from everything from sexually transmitted diseases to bronchial infections to digestive diseases to the more serious smallpox, tuberculosis. No one had any idea how infections spread. No one washed their hands or wore masks, right? But priests were fully aware that contact between themselves and Native people led to these large-scale deaths among so-called converts. They just shrugged it off. They considered it God's will, and thank God everybody was baptized. So this marked the first big demographic transition in this place, and throughout California more generally. It was dramatic. Racist thinking led priests to dismiss Native people's massive deaths and allowed presidio soldiers to justify their collective and brutal abuse of indigenous people. It was purposeful. They knew what they were doing. That said, these first European colonizers did not imagine indigenous people to be subhuman. They knew that they were interacting with human beings like themselves. Spanish views of indigenous people as fully human beings, potential Christian converts, and subjects of the crown prevailed through this period and through the period of Mexican statehood that began in 1821. At this point, the mission system ended with Mexican independence, and a new wave of settlement came to California by way of Mexico City. In those few short years, indigenous California populations declined by half to 150,000. That's huge. When we think about the period of California settlement beginning in the 1820s and 1830s, we think mostly about people defined ethnically as European with some intermarriage with indigenous. But Californios and their descendants today in Monterey were people who trace their origins to Africa, to all over Central America, as well as Europe. The settlers who came from Mexico were ambitious women as well as men, who were just lower on the caste scale than their counterparts in Mexico City. So they were more willing to colonize the northern frontier, which is us. They had much more to gain by this in land and prestige than their ancestry or class would have allowed them in the caste-conscious world of Mexico City. Those Californios resisted American domination mightily and in multiple ways and became leaders in both Mexican and American California. They ably negotiated with the Americans over decades of back and forth over land and political power during and following the war with Mexico that ended in 1848. In my own work on Salinas, I discussed this wrangling between R.M.F. Soto of Alisal, Juan Castro in Castroville, and various people of mixed ethnicities fighting for predominance in Monterey County. Salinas, Monterey, and numerous towns and cities throughout the Central Coast came into being as incorporated American cities throughout the latter half of the 19th century because of these complex interactions among people of indigenous, European, Asian, and African descent. And by Asian at this time, I am referring to Chinese settlers. Another inflection point, another point that we could have taken one path, but we did not. But we almost did. Californios largely remained in power through the early American period, 1850 to about 1880. They were not overthrown overnight. The California Constitution, written in Monterey in 1850, included a requirement for all government documents and all education to be bilingual, as a nod to the new English-speaking Americans, not because the Americans were being generous. California was a Spanish language state, culturally Mexican in the 1850s through the 1880s. Yet, and most importantly, the American era initiated a completely new racist ideology based on slavery, which regarded Native people, Chinese people, and all people of African descent as subhuman, as unfit for citizenship as wolves or bears, either to be permanently enslaved or exterminated as a fundamental part of American policy and practice. Challenged throughout history, this ideology nonetheless prevailed in California after 1880. It was a choice. As a result of this policy, the population of First Peoples declined from its high point of 300,000 to a mere 35,000. People of African descent, on the other hand, had a less clear-cut experience in this new American state. Cities such as San Francisco and Los Angeles segregated usually working class Mexican nationals and people of Chinese ancestry into ghettos. California invited this idea of racial segregation, started the whole thing. But wealthier Californios and African Americans lived in neighborhoods and attended schools right along with whites and according to their class status throughout the 19th century, and vigorously contested limits on their citizenship, such as serving on juries. They won. Their segregation came later, when they became a critical mass, fleeing first the persecution that came with the end of Reconstruction in the South, and then in the build-up to World War II. At these points, whites perceived them as a threat to the racist order of things. And this is when segregation really took hold. The point I make here in revisiting those early years of California and Monterey's history is that first and foremost, we challenge racism by remembering and honoring the important role of non-white actors in making that history. We also acknowledge these turning points that could have gone another way. Clearly, First Peoples and people of African, European, indigenous descent, commonly referred to as Californians or Mexicans, were the most important historical actors throughout the 1870s, not Northern Europeans. By the 1880s, however, in the wake of population surges brought on by the gold rush, the end of the Mexican War in 1848, statehood in 1850, and following the Civil War in August of 1866, hundreds of thousands of immigrants to California arrived from all parts of the globe, but importantly, from other territories and states in the United States, which were very deeply committed to white supremacy. California and Monterey County in particular experienced both drastic demographic change and some of the worst racial violence and racist legislation in history, all of which codified racism in new ways. They came purposefully. They came with the intention of creating in California a state based on white supremacy, just like every other state in the Union. There's no better example of this in Monterey County than in examining the history of its Chinese settlers. Chinese immigrants were not all male contract laborers who were brought in by corporate owners to work in mines, build railroads, or in the case of Salinas, to drain swamps for white settlers. Although many did this work. Chinese fishing families arrived by boat in the mid-19th century and built the largest Chinese community in California, first at Point Lobos and then near Pacific Grove and Point Alones. They were joined by people of Japanese, Portuguese, Sicilian, African, and Mexican descent, and together created a vast working-class, multi-ethnic, multiracial neighborhood mosaics throughout Monterey and what is now Seaside. In Salinas during this period, I documented many of these families, the Atai family, a family of wealthy merchants from San Francisco, and other Chinese family histories to illustrate their important roles in city building, along with everyone else. They were agriculturalists too, but hardly one homogeneous community. In this era, they were joined by immigrants from the Philippines, Japan, and all over Southern and Eastern Europe, and some Northern European countries too. According to the U.S. manuscript censuses for the earliest period of the 20th century, the 1880s, we start the 20th century really, through the 1930s, people lived in mixed-race neighborhoods throughout Monterey and in subdivision of Seaside, and throughout what is now East Salinas and Alisal. But middle and upper class whites purposefully segregated themselves in the hills of Monterey, parts of Pacific Grove, Pebble Beach, Carmel, and in certain Salinas neighborhoods. They strongly guarded those neighborhoods against any incursions of newly arrived Southern European immigrants, people of Filipino, Mexican, Japanese, Chinese, and African descent. In doing so, they consciously, purposefully maintained this racial order. One of the earliest pieces of racist legislation concerned immigration and citizenship, rather than segregated space in American neighborhoods. And Erica Lee, I know Laurel is here somewhere. Erica Lee said that. Let's credit her. She identified her sister, my colleague and friend. The 1880 Chinese Exclusion Act, reinforced and then made permanent in 1902 before its repeal in 1943, was the first time, according to Erica, in American history that any group was expressly excluded either from immigration or the path to naturalized citizenship by race. It's an example of pure racism in the extreme and generated a wave of legislation codifying racism in everything from education, neighborhood segregation, and family, political and economic participation that we are still trying to undo, right? But it's still being pushed ahead too. It was always contested by the people who were victimized by this policy. And one of the books I always recommend to my students is the I don't forget it, Defining American Identity by Race, hung, his name is, he's a color, Bill hung on, I think. You don't know it. All right, I'll find it for you, because it documents all of these legal challenges to these restrictive immigration, So I wanted to go to the slides now, because I want to show you a picture of Monterey circa the 1930s, and if you look closely, you can see clearly the demographic diversity that characterized working class Monterey in those years. Salinas, Monterey, Pacific Grove, and the subdivision of Seaside were multiracial, but they were hardly examples of kumbaya in the first decades of the 1900s. Incidents of racial violence were common throughout California in this period, including Monterey County. In 1889, 1898, and 1902, the largest Chinese settlement in Pacific Grove was destroyed by mobs of mostly working class whites who set fire to the homes of Chinese families. As I documented in Racial Beachhead, the African American soldiers of the 9th Cavalry Unit stationed nearby, because they were not allowed at this time to live among the white soldiers at the Presidio, helped the Chinese. They came to their aid. But most of the survivors of those fires fled from Pacific Grove and landed either in Seaside or Salinas, which was a more welcoming environment. Mobs of whites, mostly working class again, attacked Filipino immigrants and Filipino Americans in Monterey and Watsonville throughout the 1920s and 30s, leading Filipinos to organize in defense, and encouraged and joined by allies from other groups, including whites. I documented that episode in my book on Salinas. Both Seaside and Salinas were the more welcoming environments for Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, Mexican, and African Americans, and for both Southern and Eastern European immigrants, all of whom formed complex communities, divided internally by class, region of origin, gender, stage of migration. They were not just innovators in agriculture or fishing, although they were that too, but they were also professionals, city builders, retail business owners, and political figures who shaped the development of cities in Monterey County as much or more as their Northern European counterparts did. Many, such as the Chung, Sakata, Spiegel, Nunez, and Cacas families, joined the elite ranks of the Grower Shipper Association in Salinas and sided with the GSA in labor disputes throughout the 1930s and again in the 1970s. So again, there's nothing accidental about this. This is very purposeful. People are making choices about the way their societies are organized all along the way, and they could have made different choices. As you can see by this quotation from Major Sherman Smith, whom I was privileged to interview when I did my book, it was no accident that African Americans and multiracial families made up a significant part of Seaside's population in the Cold War and Vietnam War era. As the town most closely associated with Fort Ord, Seaside became the most important permanent destination for African Americans and Asian Americans affiliated with the military. Fort Ord, which expanded dramatically from the build-up to World War II through the Vietnam War years, was the most important Army training base on the West Coast. And the cohort of black officers and high-ranking enlisted men and their families stationed for lengthy periods there to train soldiers completely reshaped the culture, politics, social, and economic life of Seaside, not only Seaside, but also of Monterey County, in the direction of civil rights and inclusion. It was intentional. It was purposeful. It wasn't permanent, however. Seaside fast became a minority-majority city, along with Marina and Salinas. And again, this was a conscious choice. It wasn't always the case that there was a wealth disparity between Salinas, Seaside, Marina, Monterey, Pebble Beach, Carmel. At one time in the 1960s, these places had roughly the same median household income, but that took a sharp turn in the 1980s, so that now Seaside and Salinas have about half the wealth of other cities, something that Derek alluded to. This chart done by my students in my race and ethnicity in urban California class a few years ago does not include Seaside, but it does show Salinas in this context. And here's another look at that. So you can see how long it was where things were pretty equal economically. But I want to go into a little California context. By 1970, the massive migrations of African Americans from the South connected to World War II buildups and terrorism in the South, and Mexican Americans from the Southwest, primarily Texas, connected to tech changes in ag production, began to show their full effects in California cities. In the larger metropolitan centers such as Oakland and Los Angeles, but also in San Francisco, African American migrants became the lifeblood of industry and manufacturing related to the build-up to war, and then in the post-war to the burgeoning transportation, aerospace, and tech industries. These were incredibly discriminatory in hiring practices. And African Americans suffered severe job losses at war's end, as well as continued overcrowding in housing. However, since newly arrived African Americans mostly stayed and fundamentally changed the racial dynamics of those urban spaces, becoming increasingly powerful new actors in the 60s and 70s civil rights movements in California, which included indigenous rights, feminist rights, gay rights. It was multifaceted. And in California, these rights movements were unique in many ways compared to what was going on in the rest of the nation. That shows some population changes. Juxtaposed with that development in the large metropolitan centers and almost under the radar, however, Harry Truman's Executive Order 9981, issued in July of 1948 to help him win re-election, created the President's Committee on Equality of Treatment and Opportunity in the Armed Services. That order mandated the desegregation of the U.S. military, inaugurating a massive new force of African American career Army personnel, often veterans of World War II, well-educated, well-traveled, sophisticated in the race work that was already challenging American life at every level, who found in the military the socioeconomic opportunity and respect that was clearly absent in the rest of American life. They also found the usual racism that was ingrained in America. But even with that, they joined the military in large numbers as one of the only places that offered a semblance of opportunity at mid-century. These men, and they were almost always men, along with their spouses and children, altered the demographic balance, the social, economic, and political life of the Central Coast in the process. Deliberately, consciously, but not permanently. We're seeing a lot of those gains lost. So unlike in the big cities, the African American population of Monterey County in the military town of Seaside surged in the post-war, after 1948, in the 50s through the 80s, rather than in the build-up to war, or even during the war itself. Also, and unlike in those large metropolitan centers, its migrants were not factory workers, but because of their status as high-ranking enlisted personnel and officers, middle classes, already engaged in the race work in America under Dr. King, experienced travelers who lived on integrated military bases the world over, college educated, often with advanced degrees. They were forced by racial exclusions to live in the one town on the Monterey Peninsula near Fort Ord designated for Black families, Seaside, which they found was majority working class and white ethnic, with a sizable population of multiple groups of Asians, either connected to the military through marriage and family from the Philippines, Vietnam, or Korea, or from the newly formed Japanese-American community of returnees from American incarceration, who had originally lived in the most unwelcome environment of Monterey and Salinas. By the 1980s, in Seaside, the population, already a diverse multiracial mix, included international migrations of the Vietnam War era from Southeast Asia, namely Vietnamese, Cambodians, and Koreans, and from Central America, Guatemalans, Salvadorans, Nicaraguans, fleeing the environmental catastrophe and military coup and war that was going on in those places. These new migrants joined the ranks of the so-called Hispanics that were not designated, differentiated in the census, among other things that are problematic about the census. They joined the army of service workers rather than the field workers who came to Salinas. They supported this burgeoning tourist industry and also supported union organization among that class. They quickly became the majority in Seaside, which you can see happening throughout the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. The African Americans who came to Seaside stayed, most of them, just like their counterparts in San Francisco, Oakland, and the rest of Northern California. The difference was that their jobs were secure from those groups, secure. And although active duty personnel could not participate in political activism, their spouses were free to do so. So I argue in my book that women led the way in terms of civil rights in this era. They were poised to run for office and become community leaders, and they did so. They disrupted racist norms on the Monterey Peninsula and successfully challenged gerrymandering, segregation in housing, employment, and education, and made this little army town connected to this most important army base a critical part of the network of civil rights activism in California. Their successes were acknowledged as such. Dr. King made a point of a visit here in 1962. Every civil rights leader of note came to Seaside to acknowledge its significance in the race work of the era, because this community, by the 1960s, but especially by the 1980s, had already moved well beyond what was going on in the South and even in the larger metropolitan areas of California, such as Los Angeles. I want to give you a few examples of the sheroes and heroes who made a difference here. While activists were just struggling to register voters in the South, in Seaside, those voter registration drives were accompanied by successful runs for office as early as 1957, becoming a predominant force in political change. Oh my God, 3 minutes? Seriously? Okay, we'll skip over it. So I want to point out on the layout on the far right, the first Filipino mayor in American history, Dr. Charlie May Knight, single-handedly visited 125 HBCUs and brought in a new population of faculty when people were fighting busing in LA. Pearl Carey was an important leader challenging everything from employment to gerrymandering. And I would add Helen Rucker to that list. Sherman and Elizabeth Smith challenged segregation in housing. Ruthie Watts, who's sitting at this table right there, didn't single-handedly, but together with other women and men, changed the cultural dynamic of Seaside. When we brought in the Monterey Jazz Festival. And this is a broader look at the population shifts in Monterey County after 1948. I wanted to pay attention to Salinas here too. and the empowerment that came out of the UFW and the farm worker movement led by Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, and inspired so many young women and men to fight for their rights and empowerment in Salinas. They had they had great successes in Salinas right off the bat. And when they were challenged, those challenges failed. So consumer boycotts were very effective in the UFW. And when the grower-shippers organized to pass Prop 22, that would have made them illegal. That proposition failed. Finally, in 1975, the Agricultural Labor Relations Act passed that finally allowed farm workers the right to engage in organizing. So I brought a look at the census, which is deeply flawed, to show you what happened to Seaside over time. These population shifts were really important. And this is Salinas, which was something like 90% white in 1960. This is what a majority-minority city looks like. So alliances between activists in Salinas, activists in Marina and Seaside challenged gerrymandering in Monterey County, so that the Monterey County local offices now look like the communities that they represent. The federal government had an eye on Monterey County since the 1965 presidential election showed so little representation and voter participation. And so Monterey County was perceived as something like Alabama in terms of voting restriction in those days, and was successfully challenged in the Supreme Court. Simón Salinas was, along with Joaquin Avila, supported by Joaquin Avila, finally challenged the district elections in Salinas so that the Salinas City Council will never again be an all-male, all-white city council representing only the north side. It is all Latino now, almost all. And Sarah Lay was the important organization of attorneys that came into Salinas, and by the way, noticed the IQ tests and the tracking, which effectively put all children of Mexican descent into these classes they refer to as, retarded. That language is what they use. So all Spanish-speaking students were segregated by IQ tests that asked third graders, is it better to pay by cash or check? So they challenged all of that, and the Diana versus State Board of Education ruling also challenged bilingual education. So by the 1980s, local governments are now representative, right? Voting is fairer, and these initiatives that were put in place in the late 19th, early 19th century to enforce white supremacy had been systematically demolished, but not permanently so. What has been constructed cannot be deconstructed. And I don't want to end on a bad note. But I do want to point out among the sheroes, Ana Caballero, who took charge of an all-female Salinas City Council in the 1990s. And just when that happened, throughout California, the economy crashed. Prop 13 took hold. And these multiracial local governments were left without money, without funding. She had to preside over library closing in Steinbeck's birthplace. It was world over. I wanted to point out Mel Mason. That should say coalition building, because it was at this moment in time that there were a number of officer-involved shootings in Salinas, 4 or 5 of them to be exact, And there was a scandal about the way incarcerated people were being treated in Seaside. And Mel led the coalition building to challenge that. I wanted to end with the E. Walker James, who recently passed away, who was a mentor and a friend. And when he talked about Seaside in the current day, and he talked about the challenge of a majority now Latino city that had once been majority African American, he said it's racism, right? It's racism. Everybody wants the same for their children, for themselves, and I found that inspiring. So I think that you would notice, although I had to skim over most of it, that most of these historical actors are not white Northern Europeans. We need to honor, respect, remember them, and use them as a model, as an example of what can happen. History doesn't just get better and better. It happens in fits and starts. It's never by accident. It's always on purpose. And knowing that should inspire us to do better and be better, because what changes can always be remade. I'll end with my granddaughter, who built a little Lego tower that she immediately knocked down. And I said, oh no, because I thought a temper tantrum was in the works. And she said, that's okay, Nona, I'll build it back again. So it's okay, we can build it back again despite the divisive politics of our time. Thank you.
I'm here representing the Monterey Peace and Justice Center. In one of your books, you talked about Como.
I talked about what?
Como. It's a group here, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Would you talk a little bit about that?
I hate acronyms. Stanford is full of acronyms.
Multicultural.
Right. There were lots of those efforts throughout time. Efforts to come together and work together, just as Derek advises us to do, to build relationships. They were effective. And one of the outcomes was something that I think, Ruthie, you were involved with, and E. Walker James was involved with, the Yellow Jackets. So when there was evidence of crack cocaine use and gang activity in Seaside, people came together, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, came together and put on little yellow jackets and patrolled the streets themselves. That's the kind of energy and effort that was taken. Salinas, too, is building on this community-based policing that goes deeper into these problems. So we identify the problem, and the solution is never, as Derek reminds us, one group. It's always a coalition. And they were, to some extent, successful, but then they kind of fade. And I want to see them revitalized, because I think it's really important and the only way. Thank you.
First off, thank you very much for what you were sharing. Question/comment. What I'm seeing is this introduction that you gave us a strong narrative of history that many of us weren't taught in school. And what I'm seeing here is a deep need for cultural sensitivity and cultural competency in this whole Jedi movement. Have you noticed that when you have those multiple culture communities and organizations come together, the amazing insights and opportunities that can be had because diverse thinkers. I myself identify as neurodivergent. I have to fidget around to be able to listen versus if someone said, you need to look and hold your hand still and listen.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, when it comes to all these spaces that we enter, I really hope that there's the opportunity of inclusion, of acknowledging the land that we're on everywhere that we go. Because I am only 35 years old. And if you are 10 years older than me, 1978 was the first time the Native American had the right to practice religion freely here in America. the Freedom of American Indian Freedom of Religion Act. And as a California Indigenous person who stewarded this land, and I've never been included in many schools. Today it's shifting. But I just wanted to point out cultural sensitivity, cultural competency is where it's at. So,
Well, the scholarship is there.
where?
Well, the scholarship has been written. We would like it if people would read our books. It's there. So it behooves us to bring it into the classroom, all of us to bring it into the classroom, to write our own histories too. So I'm going to task you with that. Go to graduate school and become a historian. Write books. It's important to retrieve it, and it wasn't an accident I spent so much time on the Indigenous period, which was most of the time. We're nothing compared to that, so that's not accidental. So I would urge, because you are young, there's time, go do the research, go write a book.
Thank you, Dr. Carol McGibbon, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to take a break, and Justin will fill you in on what that looks like. But I wanted to remind you, before we get to lunch, I wanted to repeat one very special phrase. What good is it to have the right to sit at a counter if we can't afford to have or buy a hamburger? The purpose and reason why we're here today is to ensure that everybody gets a hamburger.
So for lunch we have salads. Follow the smell toward the hamburgers. Enjoy lunch together, meet some new people, get engaged in a relationship, because as everyone has talked about this morning, we do this together. Amen. So we have a fun activity. I want to introduce the NCBI program, Lena Lewis and Stephen Magnificent Boys. That's capital. Let's give it over to them.
Good afternoon. Welcome back for lunch. So we want to thank Derek for inviting NCBI Monterey County, the National Coalition Building Institute, to make a brief presentation here, a little exercise. This will be a little bit of talking and a little bit of participatory exercise. And so my name is Elena Loomis. I'm the president of the Monterey County chapter of NCBI. And this is Stephen Goins.
Stephen Goins, I'm the director of the CSUMB affiliate NCBI. So we're going to invert how we were going to do this. We were going to do another thing first, but the time is slipping us. So in this brief section, we're going to introduce some NCBI principles for welcoming diversity and do a couple of cross-cultural exercises. Gary wanted us to talk a little bit about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion and its deployment. Simply put, DEI work is necessary for two reasons. One, because systemic and structural oppression, such as racism, sexism, and homophobia, need to be dismantled. And two, because no matter how well-meaning we may be, we are all affected by unconscious bias and learned prejudices. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. When we say that racism and other forms of oppression are systemic, we mean that they are embedded within systems, such as healthcare, education, and criminal justice. For example, we don't have to examine the hearts of individual cops and judges to know that the criminal justice system is racist. We know that system is racist because it produces racialized results in which blacks are incarcerated at 5 times the rate of whites. When we say that racism and other forms of oppression are structural, We mean that they are upheld by laws, policies, practices, and norms that govern those systems. For example, for 25 years, basically from 1986 or so to 2010, 500 grams of powder cocaine, primarily associated with the white community, came with a minimum prison sentence of 5 years. But it only took 5 grams of crack cocaine associated with the black community to get the same 5-year sentence. So, whether intentional or not, that structural difference in the law produced racialized results of more incarcerated black people.
Another important idea to consider when we're talking about the intersection between systemic structural racism and personal prejudice and unconscious bias is that white supremacy as a belief system and systemic structural racism are mutually reinforcing. Over the last 400 years or so, white supremacy, the belief that people designated as white are naturally superior to people of color, contributed to the development not only of racist systems, but even the colorism that exists within communities of color, in which lighter-skinned persons tend to be favored over darker ones. For example, the white supremacist ideology that blacks are intellectually inferior led to laws forbidding the teaching of reading and writing to African slaves, which then reinforced what became for some the sincerely held belief that blacks were intellectually inferior because they can't read or write. Or take the idea that people of color, particularly blacks and Latinos, are more prone to criminality. This leads to laws targeting blacks and Latinos and our elevated incarceration rates, which simply reinforce the idea that blacks and Latinos are morally inferior to whites and need to be overly policed. That means that for DEI to be effective, it has to be applied at both the systemic and structural level of policymaking and at the individual level of re-examining our own prejudice beliefs and unconscious bias. And I would add creating relationships so we can learn about that.
Another one of the principles of welcoming diversity is that we're all born innocent. We are not born with prejudicial attitudes. We are taught them, either explicitly or implicitly, and while we're still children. We are all born into systems of oppression that were already operating before we got here. Those systems of oppression stratify society in such a way that some privileged identities, like white, male, and heterosexual, are favored by structural advantages, while other artificially marginalized identities, like people of color, women, LGBT folk, are less favored and structurally disadvantaged by the system and prejudices from the privileged groups. This also produces an asymmetrical relationship of power between the privileged and the marginalized and leads to oppression at worst and cross-cultural mistakes at best.
Keeping all that in mind, we are now going to have you pair up with someone, preferably over a different racial line. You're going to introduce yourself to your partner by sharing 3 groups that you belong to. One identity related to race or ethnicity, one identity related to gender, and one identity that may not be obvious. Then you will choose as a key group one that you belong to, a key group that you belong to, one that you particularly identify with, and tell your partner one strength and one challenge associated with that identity. And Stephen and I will demonstrate now.
So we're demonstrating. Hi, Elena! My name is Stephen. We're going to have a relationship now. My name is Stephen. 3 of my identities. I am bigender, I am African heritage, and I'm gay. It is Pride Week, here in Monterey.
Yeah, it is.
So I'm going to go with a key identity. I'm gay. And I would say that a strength that this identity gives me is I have learned to be my authentic self no matter what. A challenge of this particular identity, a challenge of the oppression of this particular identity, is that I have to face this idea that I'm intrinsically sinful or disordered or a criminal. Yuck.
Well, hi, Stephen. I'm Elena. So glad to be here with you. And one identity I hold is I am white. I am also a woman, and I am Jewish. And a key identity for me is being Jewish. And one strength that gives me is we are a group of people who have survived over a long period of time, and that has really strengthened us and gives me power in some respects. However, it is also a challenge because, especially right now, there is a lot of anti-Semitism, and that has created a lot of fear in my community, and including for myself.
Got it?
All right. So now, again, we're going to ask you to name those three identities. Well, first, find a partner, introduce yourselves, name your three identities, pick one that's key, and name a challenge and a strength, and then we'll come back. So you can just do it at the table, or if you want to do a quick walk around and find a partner.
I think what Darren was trying to tell us earlier was it's the relationship problem. So two other principles. We're going to get to a couple of other principles. Two other principles of welcoming diversity are one, generosity. Generosity is the key to cross-group relationships. And two, welcoming diversity requires risk-taking and a willingness to make mistakes, but then of course clean them up. So in any cross-cultural encounter, there's a possibility of being on either side of a cross-cultural mistake. So I want you to raise your hand if you think that you have ever unintentionally hurt the feelings or offended someone from another group. If you've ever had that experience. Okay, that sounds looks pretty universal. Raise your hand if you have ever experienced feeling offended or insulted by someone outside of your group, even if you think they didn't mean it, but you still, right? Okay, pretty universal. Okay, but the fact is that we cannot expect to grow closer to each other and create bonds of mutual respect and understanding without making a few mistakes along the way. Sometimes we're going to step on each other's toes. We can expect to mispronounce a name, to forget a holiday, to use the wrong pronouns, or simply not have enough accurate information about a particular group and their culture and values. The key to building community is how these mistakes are handled. So it's not about not making mistakes, it's about how you handle the mistakes once you've made them. So, and by that I mean both on the part of the person making the mistake and on the part of the person who may have been hurt by the mistake. So, listen very clearly, because this gets a little complicated, but I really want you to get this. When we make a mistake in a cross-cultural relationship where we are in the privileged position, it is important to keep in mind that people in marginalized positions are likely to have been hurt by members of the privileged group so many times that they may not even know when it's intentional and when it's not. And in fact, they may not care. And in fact, they might snap at you. When this happens, that is the worst possible time to try to educate them or tell them that they're being too sensitive. Okay? That will likely just cement you as the know-it-all, clueless oppressor. Your best bet is to apologize and see if there is an opening to ask questions for more clarity or more information, right? I've stepped on someone's toes, I've hurt their feelings, and let me attend to those feelings. Now, when we are in the marginalized position and on the receiving end of a cross-cultural mistake, then welcoming diversity may entail extending forgiveness and generosity. It is useful to keep in mind that even the most well-intentioned person from the privileged group is likely to have internalized misinformation and assumptions about your group. When someone is experiencing what it might feel to them as a risk by even reaching out to your group, that's not the time to throw in their face how woke and morally superior you are and how clueless and insensitive they are. In the realm of community building, generosity often means being able to withhold judgment and giving people the benefit of the doubt. Okay, so we're going to go into exercise time again. Okay, so with your same partner, you're going to exchange stories of either a time when you made a cross-cultural mistake or someone made a cross-cultural mistake at your expense. So whatever is up for you. I want you to share with your partner how it made you feel, and if you would like to have reacted differently than you actually did. So in retrospect, how would you have liked to have reacted? Okay? And you've got 4 minutes.
All those relationships being built. Way to go. Way to go. So, if maybe 1 or 2 people want to just give a quick response to that exercise or anything else about today that you'd like to share, raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. Angel is co-founder of NCDI in Monterey County with Fred Jealous, her husband.
You're also beautiful. It's just something to be up here and have my back to everybody and then just turn around and see you. I just wanted to share that what I shared with Tina was a mistake that I made, and that I just want to say, as you all probably know, that when you talk about a mistake you've made, you feel better. That carrying it inside is not helpful to anybody. And sometimes speaking it out loud is challenging. So it's great to actually have an opportunity to tell someone I've never met before, I did this thing and I feel bad about it, and this is what the response I got when I did. So anyway, I just want to encourage you all to confess your errors. This is not an easy journey we're in now. There were so many differences and so much similarity in terms of how we operate as humans. So,
thank you, Ann. And there was one other person in the back.
The first incident of racism that I actually remember and know that happened when I was, I think, in the fifth grade, I'm sorry. And I went to a school where most of the time I was the only black kid in the class, for starters. But anyway, so we were studying the Greek gods. And so the assignment was that we were supposed to choose a god that we wanted to be. And then you had to write about that person, that individual, study them and all of that. So we had to go write the name of the person that we wanted to be and bring it to the teacher. And if no one had chosen that person already, then you would read that person. So of course, me, who am I going to choose? Athena, of course, right? She's kind of the head female god. So goddess. So I went to my desk, I wrote down her name, I rushed over to the teacher's desk, and I was the first one there. So that meant I should become Athena. So anyway, I'm standing at the teacher's desk and she will not acknowledge me. I'm standing, and she's looking down at her desk the whole time. She knows I'm there, but she will not acknowledge me because she doesn't want me to have the first choice. So one of my friends, a little white girl, classmate, Wanda Bobbitt, we were friends and didn't have a problem with her, but she knew that she could come up there after me, which she did, and she saw the teacher hadn't acknowledged me, so she took her little slip of paper and threw it in front of the teacher on her desk. The teacher picked it up. She got to be Athena. I didn't. That was the first time.
Thank you so much. I think the interest of time, our time is up. But I do want to make a plug because NCBI is going to be sponsoring, we hope co-sponsoring with a lot of you folks, an event before the end of the year. We have, the date is yet to be determined, where we're going to host an event to build coalition and allyship between groups and organizations like you folks here, and build skills to work to address racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and all the other oppressions here in Monterey County. And we hope you will attend. And Stephen and I will be back for a brief exercise at the end. Sign up on our mailing list when we do the networking out there so we can notify you of our upcoming event. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? Are you feeling this? Raise your hand if you're feeling this. Oh, awesome. It's so cool if you are up here looking at me, raising your hands, because that's what we need to do. We need to engage our hearts, our soul, and our spirit. It's the only way we're going to get this done, because we've gone so deep down a rabbit hole. But there's hope. Without me going on too much more about that, we have a special presentation that will be made at this moment by one of my good friends, Supervisor Wendy Root Askew. Wendy, can we give her a hand? She's awesome.
Here. It's amazing to see this room full of people, and as I look around and see so many smiling faces and kind of wink and little waves at folks, so thank you all for committing your day to being here to have these conversations and do work and engage in spaces that aren't always the most comfortable, really sort of challenging us to step outside of that space of comfort into where we can actually grow and learn and connect and build the type of county that I want to live in, that you want to live in, that we collectively want to raise our families in and invest in. So thank you for investing in our community here today. I wanted to take a brief moment to celebrate and acknowledge one of the reasons that we're here, one of the people who has convened us to be in this space today. There's a little, I'm sure you've all looked through your brochures, but there's on page 9, there's a little summary of our founder for BLAAC, Derek Williams, Reverend Derek Williams. And Derek founded and started this organization that's one of the ones that sort of convened us, one of the ones that convened us here today. And I wanted to recognize and thank him with a certificate. So Derek, where are you out there? Oh, you're hiding behind the speaker. That's why I couldn't see. I was looking around. So come on up. So BLAAC was created to harness the energy created by the Black Lives Matter movement and transform this energy into a sustainable, recognized force for change. It's an organization that's built on the recognition of Blackness in the United States and the emergence of white and collective allyship. And I take this seriously. I'm raising a white boy, fairly wealthy, relatively speaking, white boy, and there is no guidebook for me. There's no path for me to know who I am in the space and how to raise my child to be an ally, to understand sort of how all these puzzle pieces fit together and the role that he has to play in dismantling the systems of oppression and racism that he's born into. So I just want to say thank you for giving me spaces to come and learn and grow, giving my community spaces to come together, to step outside of those comfort zones so that we really can build our own language, build our own comfort, and then take what we learn here back out into the larger community. So with that, I have a certificate I'd like to present to Derek Williams. Thank you. And I'll I'll just also shout out, we're here because y'all are here, and because we care. So to every organization, to every city government, to every volunteer, to every employer who dedicated staff time to have folks here today, shout out to you all. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, but I think we've got the right team in place to allow us to move forward together. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting, as I said earlier, the best leaders I've ever seen, and the best leaders I've ever learned from, the best leaders that have ever walked, in my opinion, faces are those who serve first. So, although, thank you, Wendy, for this, I can tell you, in reality, this has more to do with you than it does with me. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for this.
That's definitely so well deserved, because sometimes this work we're doing, it feels a little uncomfortable. And the good news is, if it is, then it's working. If it isn't, it's not, and you need to go back to ground zero and start again. The good news is you can do that. There's no timeline on change, on race relations, on learning how to love human beings. We are all a part of the human race. And I appreciate electeds like Wendy and others that realize that and every day bring it in their office. I'm an elected as well. I took an oath for my community. At the end of the day, that oath is what I live to complete every day with equality. I might not agree with you, but if you're in my district, I'm still going to represent you. Side note, in my district, I was elected to North County Fire Protection District. Was in the community, had a couple of people, they were skinheads, they told me this. And they said, what are you going to do about that? And I said, well, I'm going to listen to you because you're in my district. I set aside how I feel about that group and what they were doing, but I knew that because I took that oath, I'm still going to represent them and still going to keep it real. And we just need to do that. But we also need to call people out on their improprieties as well. So at the end of the day, I love it when if you're here, you're part of this mission for a better life, a better world. And as my good friend Mayor Oglesby stated earlier, I do this for my nieces, my nephews, my brothers, my sisters. I do this for your children. So we all need to do it for each other. On that note, I am going to invite up the next awesome person and speaker, Clement Miller. Are you here? Here he is. Clement Miller is the Chief Operating Officer at Salinas Valley Memorial Healthcare and the Chairman of the Board of Directors of BLAAC Leaders and Allies Collaborative. Please give him a big hand. He's helping us to help make this work.
So I'm far from a speaker. I am an ask person. So what Derek didn't tell me when I became the board chair was my job was going to be to get money. That's what I'm here for. This event didn't go off without its struggles. If you all noticed, we had to change venues at the last minute based on some funding that didn't go through that we were anticipating. Not to say that that's the reason why we have to ask. Our ask is really to get this work, to move this work forward. Sorry, I'm taller than your average person. To move this work forward in a way that would benefit our community as a whole, and to continue that work. Each of the nonprofits in this room, including BLAAC, need funding from everyone here, or from the companies you represent. So my ask of you is to sign up to support BLAAC. Get out there and as we're networking and meet all the other organizations that are here to support them. And more importantly, continue to get this message out. If you can move to the next slide, I'd also like to make sure we're talking about the ECCR training that Derek's going to be speaking on in a minute, but that's another way that you can support BLAAC as an organization and support yourself and the community around you with what you're able to learn. Is there anyone in this room that has attended ECCR? I know I've spoken to a few already. So we don't have a lot of people there yet, but we've got a number that will tell you the benefit of what they've learned by spending the time in that course. So please talk to the leaders around you, talk to the people you know, support your local nonprofits, and today as well, please support BLAAC. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you give him another hand? He's one of those people that really hands on. We appreciate it. You know, I wanted to mention it's awesome to be in a room where you have one of the most diverse communities in Monterey County, and representatives here, Kathy Biala, Marina. Give Marina a hand. Marina is brilliant. And just to let you know, on September 9th, they're going to be unveiling a long labor of love, Martin Luther King unveiling. So please be in touch with Marina. Go to the Marina City Council website. All the information's there. I've been following that for many, many years, and now they're finally doing it. So Kathy Biala, are you still here? Kathy Biala, stand up, give this lady a hand. I'm also very happy and pleased to mention that, you know, we have a Junior League of Monterey County, of which I'm a member, a proud member of. Lauren, bringing it here. She's here representing herself. Lauren, please stand up or wave. I think other people that I'm working with that are out in the community on the grassroots level. Kate Daniels-Kurtz, are you here still? Right there in front, absolutely. Making things happen in the community. And many of you probably are as well, but these are people I'm working with, so I see it every day. I also want to mention something that's really important. There's a group that, after they saw George Floyd be murdered, decided to get together and start a book club and learn about racism and systemic racism and inequality. And if you see the purple hats, they're Black Panthers. Please stand, and all. Pam Bosner is here as well. Please give them a hand. They decided to do that when something they saw that was so horrific, and they're making a difference. I'm a proud member of the group and in the book club as well. NAACP brings it every day. Please give them a hand. And when we're talking about issues in the community in regards to criminal justice, when I hear the phrase 18,000, what do you think about? There are 18,000 police departments in the United States of America. And those slave patrols were originated from that area. So we need to go into those communities, we need to work with those departments and make sure that we are helping them, as our Chief Borges mentioned in our town hall meeting last week and at our George Floyd event, learning how to humanize people in general. So I'd like to give the Chief a hand as well there. And now we are going to bring up our next guest speaker, and that is Dr. Ginny Delahoff. Would you give her a hand? Please come on up. She's also known as Dr. J. So, question, do you play basketball? Jenny Delahose has served as Vice President of Education of Monterey Bay Aquarium since 2021. She has led the aquarium's education division and its initiatives, which include teen programs, school programs, teacher development programs, and a distance learning with a renewed dedication to partnering with coastal communities around Monterey Bay. Jenny Delahose has 25 years of experience leading individuals, groups, learning experiences, multiple methodologies. Jenny has lived her experience, and in equity and inclusion, she believes that this is very, very important, and she embraces inclusivity and openness to create bridges of understanding. Can we give her another hand, please, for all the wonderful work?
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Shiva Uswe. Shiva Uswe is the language of my ancestors. I am mestiza, which means I have many mixtures, but we had a oral tradition in my family that we were indigenous. But as many of those that are Latinos know that our indigeneity has been erased and destroyed. And so when my whole family did a whole 23andMe, the DNA, and it confirmed that we were actually half indigenous. And Colombia, where I'm originally from, is reclaiming a lot of our indigeneity, and my cousin is doing a lot of work. And my people are the Muisca, the Chichas of Bogotá, Colombia. So I welcome you in both the language of my ancestors, indigenous ancestors of South America, in the ancestors of Europe, buenas tardes. And I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge the peoples that whose lands we are on. So I want to introduce you to the land and water acknowledgement that we have at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Let's see, here we go, let's try that. All right, we really want to walk away from this being a transactional, performative aspect of the work. So I'm going to invite you to bring in your ancestors today, whoever they may be, wherever they may come, to sit with you here in this moment. Take a moment to acknowledge the people of this land, past, present, and future. Thank them for the work that they are doing and that they have done. And I'm just going to let you honor the ancestors of this land and the people of this land in the way you feel comfortable for a few moments. I did play basketball very poorly. I went to an all-girl Catholic school, and they would put me in whenever they needed someone beat up under the basket. So when I engage in this kind of battle, that's the kind of person you're going to get. I was fortunate enough to be invited here today to talk a little bit about how I see when equity is done well, what will that look like in the future? And I am a firm believer in the Iroquois belief that you can't know what the future will look like until you look into your past, right? And acknowledge your past and bring it to the present. So I know that you've been working with Dr. McKibbins earlier today to learn a little bit more about the past that we have here on the peninsula, the ready for looking at and exploring and asking questions to make a new future. So I want to tell you a little bit about my past. Like I said, I was born in Bogotá, Colombia. If you've watched the movie Encanto, that is my family. And one of the things that I took my white English only speaking best friend to Colombia with me for my 40th many years ago. And she was surprised to see at the range of colors that happen in Colombia. And that is how you saw it in Encanto. That is my family, that is how we are, that's how we present. And so when we talk and refer to ourselves from Colombia, we do call ourselves the land of enchantment, la tierra del encanto. And it's one of the few places on earth that has mountains, oceans, llanos, prairies, every aspect in between. And I come from these two wonderful people, my father who is no longer with us, and my lovely mom, Federico and Miriam. And my father was born in Barranquilla, Colombia, which is on the coast of Colombia. And the people that are from this area, they're part of the Diano, actually closely related to Puerto Ricans, the indigenous people of Puerto Rico. And so many of them are tall, slender, and that was my dad. And he grew up around ocean, water, and swimming. My mother, on the other hand, was born in Bogota, which is a city, one of the largest cities in the world, surrounded by volcanoes. It is rich in indigeneity. It is rich in a lot of Spanish conquest. It is rich in a lot of different cultures. And so when I talk about the ocean, my mom, who grew up in this urban environment, has no clue what the heck I'm talking about. And I, on the other hand, while I was born there, grew up in this area. Anyone else here from the East Coast? Great. Anyone from New Jersey? Oh, where are you from in New Jersey? Where is it? Monmouth County? Oh yeah, I was not, that's not, your neighborhood is nice, my neighborhood. Just to give you an idea, when I was growing up, this is called Paterson, New Jersey, and it was called as Little New York because that's the kind of place that it is. For those of you that, and I looking around, I'm like, there are some people in my generation, so they'll hear it. But if you remember that Morgan Freeman movie where he was a principal at a high school, Seaside High, that was my town. That's where I grew up. And so, you know, when I hear sweet little kids out here talking about the city and the hood, I'm like, you don't know. But this is where I had the luxury of growing up, and I was so grateful that I did. It was hard, and it was wonderful, and I can never be so more grateful for the things that I learned while I was there. The beginning of my life, I spent a chunk of time in this building. At the time, there were no green trees around that building, but I'm glad to see that it's changed. Lots of interesting things happened. As it was down the street, there was a bodega that it felt as a little 5-year-old trying to walk to the bodega to get something from my mom. Felt like the biggest adventure on this planet. And my idea of water growing up was this. Did anyone else here play fire hydrants? Oh, yes! I tell you, my white husband has no clue what the heck I'm talking about. He's like, what do you mean you open fire hydrants? I go, well, we did, but sometimes the fire department was nice and they would come and open it for us. But this was the only way that we had water, sometimes in the heat of the summer, right? And I thought I was swimming when I was moving like this in the gutter. You know, I mean, I didn't care what was swimming by me, I was swimming. And I didn't learn to really officially swim till I was 32 here at PG High School. Yeah, and here I had been dreaming about becoming a marine biologist, you know. I had grown up watching Jacques Cousteau on TV. Yeah, I'm dating myself, I know it. On the little screen, Sundays, that's when it would happen. You would gather it, and maybe Friday was wrestling, Saturday, you know, maybe on Saturday you watched the wonderful Chinese theater, and then Sunday was Jacques Cousteau, the natural history stuff. And so I watched this, and then I saw freshwater dolphins, and I was hooked. I was like, Mom, Dad, cuando yo crezca, yo voy a hacer eso. When I grow up, I'm going to do that. And they looked at me like I was on something. And they were like, Mija, how are you going to do that? Because they were working in factories. They had no idea how to help me do that. But I knew, I was hooked. And when I got to eventually do stuff in the ocean, I realized that there were not a lot of people like me that learned to love the ocean through TV. But I know they're there. They just aren't there now, but they're getting there, and that's the whole point. So I know that I can't look forward without looking back and holding gratitude for my family, for the people that got me here, for the people that helped me get here, whether we connected by blood. I will always be grateful for the ability to have an anchor child here, because that's the only way we became legal here in the United States. President Carter, may or may not like him, but I love him because he granted us amnesty. I'm grateful for the people that eventually taught me English, because I didn't know English very well. I'm grateful for the people that have brought me to the place that I'm at. And so when I look forward, I can't help but not look back. And it's an important thing that we need to do, because as we look back, there are things that we may or may not be proud of. There may be things that we hold with some shame, with some anger, with some deep resentment. But we need to move through that in order to move forward. My good friend Corey Evan Leak, who is the DEI director of the aquarium, he and I were having a conversation this week about me saying something like, and Stacy, you were there when I said it at the meeting, that I don't want our kids to have to go through what we were. We were having a meeting with the Village Project. I don't want them to go through what I see you too. So I don't want them to go through what I went through. Corey was like, well, why not? We learned so much from it. There's enough out there for them to challenge. They don't need to be going through, like, when you walk in, am I going to be accepted? Am I not going to be accepted? Are they going to look at me such a way? Are they going to think about? They don't need to go through that. There's a lot of other problems that they don't need to be going through. The oppression, the systems of oppression that I faced growing up. And so when I look back, I look with anger, resentment, and I move through water. I learned that from Maisha T. Hill this week. I move through it like water because I know there's healing power in that conflict, in that pain. And if I learn with that, then I can move forward for the future. So I learned about this Vemijidi statement about how it is that we're going to be looking forward. What is it that we are required to do? And one of the things that they ask are asking questions about who's going to be responsible, because the fact of the matter is I can't do it all alone. What our current system tells us is that you can only do this if you're the one person. What our ancestors have told us, whether you're mestizo, you're black, you're white, is that you can't do it alone. You have to do it together with others. You have to go ahead and ask the question, who's going to do this while I do that? We as women, those of us that are women and femme presenting, have been told in the world that you have to be everything. And we hear that for the women, but the men feel it just as powerfully, right? They have to be everything. Why? Why can't we have multiple people hold us? Why can't it be everyone in community? So these are the questions that they ask about who is going to do what, where, when. Who's going to protect us? Who's going to nurture us? Who's going to guide us? Who's going to lead and who's going to follow? And when are we going to switch those places? And I thought these were powerful questions that we could sit with today as we look to the future, as we put children on our shoulders and they can put people on their shoulders as we move forward. Because the fact is we're standing on thousands of other shoulders behind us. My current work, when I came back to the aquarium, I actually started at the aquarium back in 1998. And I was there for 13 years, and I hit what I consider, what I now hear is a concrete ceiling for women of color. It's not a glass ceiling, because we can see it. We can see it and we're feeling it. But I love for that because I realized that I was talking about my lived experience, and even though I had a master's degree, people were telling me I couldn't really speak unless I had a PhD. So I went and got my PhD. And I'm so grateful for that because, you know, I have lived in Jersey, right outside New York City, where, you know, racism is blatant and you just yell at each other and you get it over with. I lived in the South where you see racism and you're like, that's how it is. But I never experienced real racism until I went to Portland, Oregon and experienced liberal racism at its finest. So, coming back, I discovered that I really wanted, they asked me to come back, and I said, I'm not coming back unless I'm my full self. Unless I can come in talking like I talk, because I know I was keeping that from my 13 years there. I'm going to come in and be that feisty Latina that people are like, there she comes again. But I knew that I had to do it that way because the future of where I'm going cannot be done without coastal communities of color. Cannot be done without coastal communities of color. Monterey, PG, Carmel, they'll be fine. But they won't be fine if they don't include Seaside, Marina, Castro, Watsonville, Chocolate. And you know why? Because you won't be able to look across your partner and your neighbor and be like, I got you. Because if we don't look at each other now, that problem's only going to exacerbate. So I came back knowing that this is the work that I need to do for the next generation. I have to bring up leaders. I don't care what color you are. I do care about your background. I want you to bring it all in with you. But we need to be able to look at each other and be real with each other. So the work that we're doing is not something that's easy. I've heard it just in the limited time that I was here. I know Dr. McKeown's probably talked about it. I'm 100% sure Derek's talked about it. It cannot be done without the heart, the mind, honestly, your soul. We are facing a soul starvation, a starving of souls in our generation and the generation of kids that we have coming in. This next generation of kids, I cannot tell you what amazing individuals they are. They inspire me day in, day out. Don't get me wrong, I want to hit them upside the head every once in a while when they say dumb things. Man, the souls that we have coming on this planet right now, they're gifts. They're gifts to us. And they deserve better from us that are older than them. They deserve us to fix our crap so that they can move forward in the world they need to change, because we're leaving them with a lot of crap. So we got to do this with our heart and our mind, our ancestors, our souls, because there's a lot of work to be done. And again, we cannot do it alone. We must do it in community. We can only heal in community. Racism and other structures of oppression were created in community. The only way to heal out of it is in community. So, how do we do this work? I know, I had to throw a couple of corner pictures in there. You know I had to. You know the interesting thing about this particular animal? It's called a sea bass. So, believe it or not, this is kind of a baby. I know, big animal, tasty too. So, am I wrong? How many people like sea bass? Oh, there we're talking, right there. That's right. The older they get, the more spots they get. It's not about size with them, it's about spots. So any of us that are feeling those little, ink spots that are coming out, means you're getting better looking. So, how do we do it? We need to tend to relationships. So, this week, and I'm going to be totally authentic and real and super vulnerable, I was in the meeting with the Village Project at the aquarium, and we've been really having a deep discussion about how to interact best with the Village Project. We have very differing opinions across the whole organization. And me and my sincere desire to make sure that people were hearing some of the pearls that one of the Village Project people, a young black man, was talking, I re-articulated his words in ways that I really was hoping the white people and non-blacks would hear it. My sweet, kind, generous friend, black man, Corey Lee, came out and said, "Sister, I know what you were trying to do, but don't speak for black people." Ooh, that hurt. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, Here I am trying to do the soul work. Here I am trying to like do the best I can and make sure to elevate Black voices, and I was speaking for them. And I was like, damn! And so I gotta say, like, I got in the car, and Corey told me that. He told me, because, you know, and then when you get to know Corey Lee, which I do hope you all get to know him, he has the most dulcet voice. He goes, now we'll talk about equity. Everyone's gonna love equity and diversity. He has this nice, deep, sultry voice. And he says, sister, I know you meant well, but you spoke for Black people, don't do that. And I was like, oh. And I felt shame. I mean, I'm sure many of you have been in that. All of us are human. We've been in those places where we stepped into it unwittingly. And I was like, you're right, Corey. I didn't mean it that way, but I do acknowledge the impact. I felt the shame. I moved through it like water, thanks to my HT Hill teaching me that. And I said, I so appreciate you telling me, hermano. Thank you for sharing that with me, and I'll do better. I really don't share that to be clapped at, but just to tell you that the work is continual. I've been doing this equity work, this DEI work, before it was called multicultural education, or when it was called international, interrelational. I mean, it was called everything else what it is now, and I'm sure in 5 years it'll be called something else. So I've been doing this work for a long time, and I tell you, I am humbled on the constant. And I'm grateful for people that step in. So he tended to that relationship to make sure that I was tending to harm. So people who were here from the Village Project, I am sorry if I caused harm. I went to my Black peers teams. I apologize for the harm, the impact that was. I understand that in my generation, code switching, when I finally got to own it, felt real, good, and authentic. And now this next generation feels it's inauthentic. And I gotta respect that and acknowledge it. So you gotta tend to the harm. And you know, sometimes it's immediate and sometimes it takes years, but you gotta tend to it. Because if you don't tend to the harm you've impacted, the hole you make in yourself persists and just gets bigger and envelops others around you. We create places for health and wholeness. One of the things that we're working at in education at the aquarium is recognizing that the youth that are coming in are not just coming in to deal with environmental issues or to get into schools or to make more money. No, that's not the only thing they're tending to. They're tending to their mental health. They're tending to that soul sickness that I was talking about. So we are working hard, we're still beginning, but we're beginning to tend to create emotional, psychological safety and teach resiliency. It doesn't look easy, and it means I'm gonna have to lean into my community's brothers and sisters to help me with that. Because I'm an environmental educator, I'm a scientist, I'm a social scientist. I may know a little bit about it, but I don't know what that means culturally for a Black, Asian, Pacific Islander, Southeast Asian. I don't know what that means for that child. I need community to help me grow and tend to this health and wholeness. The whole body, the whole mind, the whole heart, the whole soul. One of the things that I'm also really leaning into, and that, again, my wonderful hermano Corey Evan Leek has taught me, continues to teach me about this, is about teaching our stories. I think stories is one thing that we have been taught to forget. If you're a Spanish speaker, you know that we have a lot of dichos, a lot of statements. You know, so I'm always like, in my family, my married family, my husband's white, my stepchildren white, you know, I'm throwing out these dichos all the time. I'm like, nadie aprende por consejo. No one learns through advice. And you hear my sweet little stepchildren, which are now actually grown, they're no longer little, but they go, nadie aprende por consejo, Jenny. And I'm like, you're right, nadie aprende por consejo. I don't care that they massacre it. They're trying, but they know that the dichos are there. And those dichos come from our stories, right? They come from the stories that our grandmothers told us, that their grandmothers told them. And so we need to teach each other our stories, because it's only in that we really start learning the richness of America. We have forgotten that we are a mixed people. We really think that this racial construct that was created to separate us is true, when we know it isn't. When you may present white, but we know you're a Heinz. Come on now. I mean, you've been told to hide all these different things about you. And so I tell my husband, we go to the Scottish games, we eat English, not good food, and we go ahead and enjoy the French aspects of his life. Yeah, my husband once turned to me, we were watching a video, and I don't remember what the video was about. This is my second marriage, and when we got married, oh, God love my husband, he is so wonderful. I turned to him when we got married and I said, listen, I'm really going to be doing this racial equity healing work for the rest of my life. Are you on board, tall white man? And God love him, he went and did his own work and he came back and he said, I'm with you. And so we were watching the show and something came on about how casseroles are a white American thing. And he looked at me and he said, you mean all this time you make casseroles, that's for me? I go, you think Colombians are making casseroles? We arroz, frijoles, we papas. I don't know what you're talking about with this casserole, but yes, only for you, my friend, and I learned to love it. So we teach each other the stories. We teach each other how these casseroles came to be. I'll teach you how sancocho was made and how sancocho came from the enslavers trying to give food to all the indigenous and black people and trying to feed them all day. That's the food of my country and my heritage. But you won't know that until I tell you my story and you sit, listen with curiosity. So, why is this working for him? When George Floyd was murdered, the aquarium had a big reckoning moment. As a white privileged organization sitting on the peninsula, we had to really come to terms with, were we going to really step into this work, or were we going to have to just kind of melt into the night, just kind of lay low? God loved Julie Packard. She didn't come at it overnight, but she came to it quick. Her two daughters were the ones that really pushed her over the edge. And Julie did her work. You know, for a woman that is 76 years old, that's not easy to be learning something brand new overnight. It wasn't brand new, but it was new enough for her to check her privilege. I mean, she's always recognized she's had privilege with a lot of money with the name Packard behind it. She's not acknowledged it. But to acknowledge her race, her gender, and what that's played in systems of oppression, that's a whole other level. And so we started working, and this is what she came with. And she really, really recommends that the only way we can move forward with ocean conservation is with diversity, is with equity, is with inclusion. So, the reason I do this work is for this little 5-year-old. This was my first American party in the United States. I was so excited. So for those of you that also lived in poverty, you'll get this. In my family, we were so poor that we would only celebrate, have celebrations every 5 years. So it was 5, 10, 15, 20, you know. And maybe we would have maybe a cake in the years in between. So this is my 5, it's a big deal. It's a year I also got baptized here. I was a heathen before that. But I do it for this little girl that was dreaming forward. I do it for this little girl. She's in 2nd grade here in this picture, and she was diagnosed with or she wasn't diagnosed. She was told she had a learning disability because she didn't speak English well. And it was this really super, super mean 2nd grade teacher that looked at me and said, "You're not dumb." I was like, "Oh, thanks. I don't know what that word means, but okay." And she took me under her wing and taught me to read, and by the end of 2nd grade, I was teaching reading at a 5th grade level. This talking, mean teacher. I do it for the 16-year-old. Yes, look at that hair, right? Oh yeah, it's all coming back. I know. How much hairspray? Yeah, a lot. Ozone layer right there, friend. I do it for this 16-year-old who is thinking about wanting to be a marine biologist and not knowing how to do it. I do it for this person. This is me early on, Young Women in Science, second year into the program. I created this program for girls like me who didn't know how to do marine science or wanted to do it. They were bilingual, they were bicultural. How the heck do you tell your parents, I want to go and do this for a week when they're counting on you to take care of your siblings while they're at work? How do you do that? Well, it started back in 1999, and I'm glad to know that we have new permutations of this. All these kids are in their 30s, by the way. I know I look fantastic now, but that's true. But I do it for that educator that I now have educators of that age working with me now that used to be my students. I do it because the future of otters, the future of our sharks, the future that we have of our charismatic megafauna are not going to be possible without youth that think differently than the people doing the work today. Without the youth coming in with a different lived experience, we won't get at it. And we need every possible person to make the changes happen. I do it for these animals that are fantastically, like our invertebrates are the ones that people don't often think about, but are the biggest aspect of the oceans that we have out there. And then when you see them, you're like mystified. And you thank the universe, the goddess, the God, whoever you think of, thank you for these amazing animals that teach me how this world is so special. I do it for the wonder when I see you across the aquarium, like walking around and you see people and they're literally in awe of what they're seeing in front of them. When I see kids seeing each other in awe, when I see adults finally discovering something wonderful and similar in someone that looks completely different than them, that's the reason we need to do it. I do it for the kids that don't see themselves as scientists yet. This picture was 20 years ago. And so I'm doing it for the kids that when they get there, and maybe their community says, we don't swim. They say, yes, we do. These are Head Start kids that we've been working now for close to 25 years. And I do it for them so that when they come to the aquarium, they know what it's like, that they're welcome. You know, their parents are telling them, no toques, no corras, don't run, don't touch. But I'm saying, run, touch. Okay, don't climb that, that's not good. But I'm encouraging you to be here and be you and bring all of you. I do it for the kids that are seeing the future in a different way than we've ever seen it. I mean, the kids that come and what they think about, oh my gosh, it fills me with joy and just satisfaction every day of my life. You know, I had a choice of coming back to the aquarium or continue to do consulting work in this diversity, equity, and inclusion field. And for a while there, we were making money. But I came back to do this for this reason, because this is my future right here. I do it because of kids like this. This picture is about 15 years old. The kid in the middle, his name I'm spacing on, found a shark tag in Hawaii. So this is where he's from. He's originally from Hawaii on the Big Island. And he found out that the tag came from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. He had tagged a shark. And so he contacted Monterey Bay Aquarium. This is actually Chris Schoen, who is the CEO of the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. And he came, we brought him over from Hawaii with his mom, and he learned all about sharks. And he just talk about making dreams, you know. But something he found on the beach was the thing that inspired him. So I do it for these kids that were my students and are now colleagues of mine. The one on the left works at the city of Watsonville. The one on the far right, she's actually the manager of sustainability at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Do it for these people. These are my family back east. Super conservative, evangelical. I don't know how they do what they do, but they do.
We don't see eye to eye, but I do it for them. I do it for this family, my family on the West Coast. And we're all wearing white, but it's hard to see. My family ranges in all different colors. But I definitely, the white people are on the right side, that's for reals. And that's my married family, the family that I've adopted into my life, that have taught me things about whiteness that I had no idea about. And then my family. I do it for these people, because this is my future. This is the way I'm pointing. It's all those kids. If I don't fix what's happening here, I can't fix the future for the kids. 7 generations from now, as our Iroquois brethren have taught us. I do it for this, and I do it for those of you that are here with me. I'm so grateful I am no longer alone. I'm so grateful that Derek and BLAAC has convened this group of people to show us that we're not alone, and that we can hold hands while we may not agree with each other, but look at each other and know that what we want is the best for all of us, and especially our kids. So with that, I leave it to you. Thank you. That's it. Some of us did not have the internet at that time, and so we had to use like magazines, you know. So I used a couple magazines, didn't work out. So I called my mother-in-law, she sent me a bunch of recipes, and that really helped. But yeah, the internet's still your best friend these days. How did we do without it? I don't even know. Card catalog, y'all remember what I'm talking about most of it.
Before she died, I got to know Jenny Osvaldo. And she was a champion of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And she had planned a commemorative walk in memory of the burning of the Chinese village. Yes. And I understand that you, in her honor, you named a penguin after her. Could you talk about that?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. As we've continued this, a specific growth has started recognizing and starting to make amends for all the years of harm with what they were trying to do. The Zapato family in particular has honored us with the ability to go ahead and take Jenny's name, and we did name one of our penguins, one that hatched on exhibit, and renamed it for her. The Zapato family was there when we released the chick onto exhibit. It's now a full-fledged penguin. So if you want to go there, you can actually go and look for a name tag, and you can see her name right there on her. So thank you for asking. And we're now having an annual festival event commemorating what the Pacific, the AAPI group has done here on the peninsula. So thank you for that. Yes.
I just wanted to acknowledge what you're doing for the sensitivity training for the indigenous people.
Thank you.
I did.
Yes, Auntie, you were there.
Yeah, I was asked to come and help prepare the indigenous luncheon for the aquarium, and I feel like I gave you some words.
Yes. So our wonderful auntie here, whose name I'm spacing on, I apologize, I can't remember. Marianne, that's what I thought, thank you, was one of the wonderful elders that came and has taught us about our indigenous past here in the peninsula. The aquarium is going through a decolonization process. We're looking at our practices, policies, and procedures to try to decolonize them. Auntie Marianne was like one of the people that came, taught us about the ways fed us some delicious food. It wasn't casserole. And it was, and we are still in a wonderful journey for that. We are doing so much work here, and I'm grateful to you and to all the elders who humbly and graciously give us of your knowledge and your stories. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I would like to speak on behalf of the Chumash people that they are looking at doing what Monterey has done, so we're trying to work with them for sanctuary there.
Wonderful. The Chumash Sanctuary down south. Yes, we're working also with them. Thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
I actually have two questions. So when I was young, I wanted to worked out. But what I wanted to know is what you guys think about that purple sea otter spilling stuff. And two, how can we help the youth programs at the aquarium?
Oh my gosh, thank you for those questions. So, first of all, I want to say, how many people here dreamt of being marine biologists sometime in their life? You're not alone. I got to tell you, at least like half the women I meet say, I want to study dolphins too. And I'm like, I know, me too, but that didn't happen. That's okay. So you're not alone, yes. What are we doing about the sea otter stealing surfboards? Yeah, let me just, I think we should call the sheriff. I do think there's a jurisdiction issue. That's what we're claiming. We're claiming lack of jurisdiction of the city. So if that's what you want to stick with, Sheriff, I'm with you on that. The last thing, how can we help? In addition to helping BLAAC, in addition to helping the Village Project and other community groups, this year we were lucky enough to go ahead and offer the first ever 4-year scholarship for 2 local youth here. And I'm going to say it here because I can say it now before they start coming down about the 11th Court mandate about how you can't have all this other. For youth of color to go to 4 years at CSU on the aquarium. Continue that program, and they don't have to do marine science. One of them is a computer scientist, and the other one's a policy major. So this is not about creating marine scientists, this is about creating citizens that have the ocean and a love of nature as part of their lives. So anything like that, but honestly, the biggest thing you can do is support the Village Project, Boys and Girls Club, BLAAC, people doing that work in the community. That's really what I think. If you want to volunteer, we're going to talk. All right, thank you so very much. I so appreciate it.
Thank you. So, that was awesome. Eurocentric cultural reflectionism. I'm introducing Derek Williams in this way. We've heard a lot about him today. We all know he's a rock star. He's doing so much in this community. And most of all, he's asking the hard questions. It's something that you've got to experience. If you haven't, consider taking their course. I attended an event, and Derek isn't going to just say this, and neither will Joy. But they were at this event, one of their events. I came out of that event so moved. And this is my field. Inclusion, diversity, dealing with pain, dealing with suffering, of community. And I just walked out and I just started crying. Thinking about all of the harm, the hurt, the pain that so many African American men have endured forever. I sat there in that event and I thought of my father when he ran for supervisor in this county, when we had on a nightly basis pick up the phone and people that didn't want that to happen, using the N-word and asking him to get out of it, telling his daughter to tell my father. I think of all the African American men that have dealt with so much for so long. And this course gives you an opportunity to learn about that. To get it, to really get it. And you become even better for it. Because we need to heal. And part of what that was for me in that event was healing from it. So I appreciate Derek Williams, I appreciate Joy Jacobson inviting me to that event. It was awesome. And consider that. Consider taking this course. I guarantee it will change your life. Also recommend people that live in areas that might not know much about our community, and recommend that they take the course, because that's where we have to start. So on that note, I'm going to simply share a couple of reasons why Derek is going to come up here and talk to us. BLAAC was created to harness the energy created by the Black Lives Matter movement and transform this energy into sustainable, recognizable force for change. They are doing it. It is happening. You can feel it happening today. So on that note, can we give this man a hand and just appreciate him?
A couple of things in regard to homework, or a couple of things of housework I want to do here. First and foremost, in the back of your programs, you will notice a QR code that Clement has spoken to, reference to. The QR code leads you to our website where there are a number of different things. You can donate there, you can look at courses there, there's a lot of information on a QR code. You can please scan it and look forward to it. Also, right now, the volunteers here are passing out a DEI survey. I want to tell you a little bit about that real quick. DEI is an interesting thing. And as I see it and as I hear about it and as I talk to more people about it who are facing the challenge of what that means, they are facing challenges from a number of different reasons. I think one of the things that happens most often is that what I've seen in the past is changing, but people walk into this work without a clear notion of what it really is. They walk into this work without a complete understanding, so objectives aren't necessarily made as whole as they should be. Also, they're coming into the work oftentimes from people who themselves may not know exactly what their work is, so there's a lot of reaching and a lot of pulling for information and guidance and help, and in that there's a struggle. So, part of what we do with DEI in a corporate or business perspective is guided by insurance, guided by HR rules, and the need for HR to implement. But legalities as well too. There are certain things you can't say and you can't do, there are things you can't approach because, well, they're too sensitive, ironically. We want to treat sensitivity without touching the areas of sensitivity. So, this is part of the reason why we created, or why BCCR was created. When George Floyd was murdered, somewhere along the line, very few of you probably know, maybe all of you know, but somewhere along the line, the state of California university system said, we're going to make mandate ethnic studies for all students graduating from the schools in the state of California. They said this quietly, and they also said by the year 2023, it's going to be in place. This is what we're going to do. How many people heard of that when that happened? Yeah, they snuck it right in. And then they made it work. Not a whole bunch of hoopla, not a whole lot of fighting, but I thought to myself, you go right ahead, California. You're shaking a step on this people or not. You're making a move. And you just boldly did it. I mean, it was done quickly. George Floyd was murdered, and shortly after, the largest educational system in the world stepped up and said, this is what we're doing. And it just happened. I found that really amazing. But, you know, I've been in college, and sometimes I know that it's a nice gesture, but how's it going to be taught? What's going to be taught about it? And having been African American all my life, I can tell you there were things I should have known that I didn't get a chance to know until I got out of high school, until I became an adult. There were things my parents told me, my grandparents told me, my sisters, my community told me, everybody told me about, but there were other things about being black in America that was hidden from me, that was taken away from me, that was lied about, and as I got to be a certain age, I was in shock because I didn't know. Had I known, what would have happened? So when the state of California said we're going to do something, I thought to myself, okay, if we're going to do this, let's do this right. Because there's one thing I know about this rule of education is going forward. It's great. The cognitive approach, the academic approach is great. It's fantastic. I love that people are teaching people It's absolutely necessary. But if we're going to put that in line with the issues we have socially, there's another statement I need to make. If that method could have reduced or eliminated the problems we have today, it would have been done a long time ago. Don't stop teaching. Don't stop educating. But maybe it's time to educate in a different manner. ECCR was created not so you could learn only about what has happened, but that you would feel the weight of what's happening. It's in relationship. There are people, even inside the course that we teach, that have asked me about certain issues. I'll tell you something that's really interesting. It just flashed in my head, but it's a true story. The other day I was sitting at a dinner party and a friend of mine walked up and introduced me to a friend of his who he was celebrating his birthday for, and he was telling him that everything is paid for on his birthday on that day. His dinner was paid for, his golf was paid for, everything's paid for. He didn't have to lift a finger for the weekend. And he was boasting about this. And I was like, you know, I'm glad you're my friend. But the friend that he introduced me to was had some questions, and I was wearing a hat that had a black logo on it. He looked at me and he's like, what's this about? And I was like, well, it's called marketing, and I'm glad you asked the question. He started, we started talking about what was going on, and I told him, now get this, I've never seen this man before. I've never seen this man before. And I was telling him about BLAAC, what we're about, where we're going, what our goals are, what our focus is. And he looked at me straight in the face and said, well, are you doing anything about the black fathers that don't want to be around the children? You see, I will say this, and it sounds somewhat racist, but it works. White people don't get that. I mean, old school, I would have dropped him in a minute. I mean, seriously, dude, do you know you're talking to a black father? You know, and do you understand the incarceration rate? Do you understand the history of what's going on? Do you know why black men are not working? Do you understand what has happened to the black community because of what white people have done, particularly white men have done? Do you, I mean, I sat there with this man for 5 minutes and dropped bomb after bomb after bomb. Yeah. He did not know who he was talking to. Told him point blank, do you understand that my father was shot in the head for dating a white woman in Tyler, Texas, by a white sheriff? And my uncles were murdered by white people because they had positions of leadership in the doctors in Chicago. Do you understand my grandfather was a shareholder, a sharecropper? He probably died as a shareholder, but he was a sharecropper, and he was ran off the only piece of land he had. And my mother was raised with shotguns at the door and told, shoot to kill and keep shooting if you have to. I ran down some stuff to this man, and he did not have the capacity to understand what I was talking about. And when I saw the glass in his eyes, I decided to break the glass. For the rest of the night, the man sat at that table over there, and every time I turned around, he was just staring at me. Yeah. Now, do you understand why black men may not be around their children? New story. This is what ECCR is all about. The facts and stats are really good to know, but the weight of this is what changes things. If we're talking about race and race relations and fixing things, and at some point you're going to have snot running out your nose and tears out of your eyes, we're not being effective in our communication. If you can't feel my pain, and I cannot feel your change, if I can't embrace you at the point where it hurts the most, if I can't be embraced, then our communication is ineffective. White people are at a disadvantage because they've typically never been told or taught how to have a conversation about race. And if they do, guilt and shame is the first thing that jumps in front of them. And so the natural condition condition, human condition, is to protect itself from pain. What happens when we have that conversation? We want to bail. So, people of color, if we want sustainable change, we have to embrace the fear and the change of the people who would normally want to run away. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot of work to do. Outside in the lobby, you will find this book, Combined Destinies, an anthology of stories of people's lives, white people, who talk about racism. And you'd be amazed, you'd be alarmed if you understood the depth of what these people felt. Pain, shame, glory, glee. Stories that have never been told, and probably stories, many stories out there of people who want to talk but haven't had the voice or ability to talk. This book demonstrates ECCR in a way that, unless I read the book, I would say nobody else could actually express it. This book, which I just learned, has been in print 10 years. 10 years. And to date, it is still the only book of its kind in print. I want to say that again. This book has been in print for 10 years. And after 10 years, it is still the only book of its kind in print. That's massive. It's also an audio, and you have the ability to listen to audio. Oops, excuse me. The audio is out there in the lobby, which we're going to get to in a minute. And I also want to say, break my thought right now. The authors, Angelus and Caroline Haskell, are here. Justin said I was his hero. You were mine. ECCR is not easy. And I can tell you, it's a 14-week course. It's not DEI. It's a race relations boot camp. It's not DEI. I don't care about your definitions. I care about the meaning you carry from it. For example, somebody said, hey, you know, we're going to talk about microaggressions today. I'll say, fine, let's talk about microaggressions. But I can tell you there's no such thing as microaggression in the vernacular of ECCR. Because microaggressions don't come from when you play small, and they don't go when you play small. It is an aggression. Academically, we need to hierarchically put these things in check so we can talk about them and understand them. But in reality, in relationship, there is no such thing as a microaggression. If I'm standing in the line and the checker looks at me and somebody just steps in and I say something, that's not micro. That is deliberate action on one part, or it is I am invisible on another. What is micro about that? If we're going to talk, let's talk. If we're going to change, let's change. ECCR is not about playing the role. ECCR is about facing it, talking about it, being real about things in ways that we've never actually been given an opportunity. 14 weeks, we cover a number of things in 14 weeks. The last class we had at ECCR, a young woman who was studying for a doctorate was sitting in the room and we started having conversations. And we talked about the safety and the brave space and the safe space and the modalities, the breathing, and the ability to manage and hold on to and release and deal with your emotions, because that's where the problem is. The problem is not up here. I do not want to change your mind. I want to change your heart. If I change your heart, your mind will follow. That's where ECCR goes. But it's hard conversation. Anyway, I had this young lady that was in the class, and we were talking, and within the first 10 minutes after we got through the formalities, her comment was, wow, we're really going to go there. Yeah, no, we're really doing this. We're doing this. Yes, we're doing this. We are doing this. Because just like Dr. Jenny spoke about the 5-year-old and the 2nd grader and my great-grandchild, yeah, I'm doing this. We're doing it together. Somebody has to step into that space. Somebody always has to. So, this is it, ECCR. It was started out to be a college course to meet the mandate for the state of California, because I wanted a course that was going to be different. And then we piloted the program, had to reduce it and shrink it down. We piloted the program, and it was so rich. It was so rich that I decided it needs to stay where it is, in the community. Not in a place where only certain people would be able to achieve or receive it. And based on what I see at CSUMB, with the reduction of African Americans being into school, we started out with 500, now we have just over 100. When we look at the disparities of the education system, I'm thinking to myself, why would I want to put this in a place where my people are not? A place where my people are restricted. A place where I would not be able to see my Filipino, my Hispanic sisters and brothers. No, I'm going to put it out in the public. That's what we did, and we're still doing it. I want to share a couple of things before we move on, because we got a couple of things we're going to do here today that's really interesting relative to the summit. I have a couple of people here who have been through the course. I'm going to call them up and ask them to give you a little testimony. We're going to give them about 2 minutes each. Tell you what their thoughts are when they're feeling about ECCR. I can talk to you all day long. I spent 25 years in sales. I could probably sell it to you. But this is about relationship. So a few people have been willing to speak to their relationship about ECCR. So Ron and Ann, would you please come up? Antonio, would you please come up? Justin Newsworthy, would you please come up? So the question is, have you taken ECCR? And if you can, summarize your experience of what the class was for you.
So I was really excited about taking this course because I really felt called to change my life when I witnessed, like all of us did, the murder of George Floyd on television. And as part of that journey, this class appeared, and I was very excited to take it. Little did I know that my tender heart was going to be really challenged, but in a really, really good way. And Derek has said, 14 weeks, but let me tell you, they were really, that was not enough. I really wish we had ended the class. I want to say that I tend to, I think a lot of white people, we want to be really strong up here in the brain, and he insisted that we get down, into our heart and our gut. And it was tough love for me, but fortunately I've experienced that before, so I stuck around. And it was worth everything. I just want to say that if you're white and you think that you're not racist, you're wrong. But that's okay. We are human beings. We're not bad people, and I think that was something that was important for me to learn that I can share with others.
My name is Ron Kihara, and this lovely lady is my wife, Anne. Like Anne, I would say that I embarked on the ECCR journey thinking that it was a head trip, that I would intellectualize what Derek had to share with us, and boy, was I in for a surprise. And so I would confess now that being an Asian American married to a white American and spending much of my life in white circles, not completely, but often in public circles, people of color, blacks and browns, would become invisible to me. Some of you know. It's a strange thing for me to say because I'm legally blind, but maybe you can imagine and empathize with me that when you meet people of color in public, we can be pleasant but not engaging. And so what I've learned from ECCR and from Derek himself is the importance of relationship. And in that sense, for me, it has been transformational, I would say, because when I come across people now, I am not dismissive. I try to, bear with me, look them in the eye, engage with them, and acknowledge them as persons, as important persons. And yes, thank you, Derek, for all you've taught me.
My name is Antonio Garibaldi, and I was privileged to do the, how do you call it, the first time it was done. And now there you go. So then doing this course, thinking I knew, everything I needed to know about being African American in America, growing up in Marina, and having friends that were such a diverse culture that there was a time in my life I didn't believe that racism existed, that I moved up to Butte County. And oh, you've been there, right? I had a Sally while I was up there, and he said, what are you going to do when you get out? And I was like, probably go back into communications or something like that here in Chico. And they don't let no black folks do that. I was like, there ain't no racism anymore. That's it's gone. And he looked at me and said, man, I thought we killed all of you. And racism is alive. I didn't believe this is 1994. So then I had to go through some trials and tribulations, and finally figured out I needed to do some things to get my life right. This course, I'm glad I took this course at a time when I did, because if I was any younger, I'd probably be a very angry individual. But you can't dismiss the chronological order of events that brought us to this place. And it still makes me mad. The thing that makes me sad is that there's other cultures that try to keep us down or look blind or whatever. And it was taught by what they experienced being around the Europe, Anglo, whatever, don't say it like that, the white folks, for lack of a better term. And that really made me sad. I felt duped because I believed that everybody was everybody. That's the way I was raised. And to find out that it wasn't like that, career and a direction to deal with folks that have mental challenges. Not realizing that my brothers of color were God represented. And so, when Derek asked me to do this, I felt obligated to be able to speak. If you take this course and it doesn't open your eyes to what it really is, then you guys that person's from somewhere else, and you're in Florida or whatever, But those of you that are in this room that are getting this information, you take this course, like Derek says, I want to be part of the change I wish to see in my community and in the United States. That's what I am. So, thank you for the course.
Thank you for sharing, Antonio. So to enroll in the course you're an Anglo white, or however you want. You can ask Antonio. As the parable goes, two young fish are swimming along in the ocean, and older fish swims by and says, "Water's nice today, ain't it, boys?" And then he swims away, and then one of the young fish turns to the other and says, "What the heck is water?" And the point is, in innocence and naivety, you don't understand your context. And Derek has facilitated and curates a space through this course where he is the wise old fish explaining what water is to many of us, especially those of us who are white. And it's a context that's framed within love. I think you have heard the love that Derek brings to the table, but it's love that also incorporates truth, because love absent of truth really isn't love. And so it's a phenomenal learning experience to understand a little bit more of the reality in which we find ourselves, because too often we just accept the reality without asking big questions, hard questions. And so I would agree with everyone that has just shared that it's very much worth your time.
So I could tell you more and more about ACCR, but I guess that's really what it is. A challenge for me and ACCR is to walk the line of acceptance in corporate structures and associations where HR, legalities, and insurance companies might say, you can't say that, you can't do that. I don't know. When I was a kid, my mother told me that, and I always did it anyways. Yeah, hard head, soft bottom. But I'm putting this out to you because in words of leadership and to understand what BLAAC is doing in the community and where we want to be in the community, that's where we want to be. We don't want to be where the rubber meets the road. We want to be the road. We want you to travel our path to truth. We want to change it from the norm. We go a little deeper. There is a document that's passed out to you asking you about your DEI survey. You see that? Please answer those questions and give them back to us. What that survey is going to do is a couple things for us. It's going to help us formulate a better ECCR, Eurocentric cultural reflectionism working class go forward. Also, more importantly, what that's going to do for us is going to help us shape what next year's Race Relations Summit meeting will be like. Let me ask you a question. Did you enjoy today?
Yes.
Next year, we want to do something bigger and better. We want to more focus. We want to go down a little further. We want to be able to bring you something that's more appetizing and more meaningful to you. We're going to invoke more community-based organizations to help us deliver it and bring this out. But we want to hear from you as well. We need to hear from you as a community, As the leaders in this community particularly, we need to hear from you so that we can create the things in the community that will not only aid you in taking care of us, but allow us to take more responsibility for us to take care of ourselves. There she is. Joy Jacobs, come up here, please. Yeah. So I wanted to say this. I started doing this course, I guess, up in 70. I mean, how long have you done now? Come on up here, please. And Joy has sat through every single course. 14 weeks per course. She has sat through every single course and gone through every person's emotion and everything else that has happened. A couple months ago, we were at a George Floyd symposium that Jacqueline put on over at Oldemar Center. And they were selling things that were right there. And I saw something that I thought would really be really interesting because she's a lover of Maya Angelou. But more importantly, I wanted to say that I want Joy to tell you a little about CCR, but I also want to tell you something, that the work that I've done and the work that's been completed, even in today, you've seen it all day, would be virtually impossible without her.
I'm supposed to talk now, but I can't talk anymore, thanks. ECCR is an amazing program. It is 14 weeks, and it feels like a really long time, but when it's over, you don't want it to be over. Right? I mean, it's like, oh. It's life-changing, and not one person has gone through it that hasn't said, wow, you changed my life. So all I can do is recommend it 198%. Yeah, please join us. I'll probably be there for the next one, too.
So, we were at this place with Jackeline's symposium of the day, and Anne McDowell quoted these wonderful things of Maya Angelou, and they are exquisite. You'll get a chance to see it because you'll be carrying it, maybe wearing it around.
I think it's going to be better than that.
But anyway, this is just my gift to Joy.
Oh, gee, thank you, sweetheart. My heroine, my whole life. And, you're up there too.
So we're going to have these out to you. These are little documents, a little bit more about ECCR, pretty much the same one you see up there. With the code in the back, you can do that and find out more information about ECCR. Our number is there. Please give us a call. We'd like to talk to you more about ECCR, how we can mold the program for your organization, how we can help pass the point of DEI and go to the point of relationship. We want to make a difference, and we're here to serve you. So please give us a call, let us know. We're gonna have a little fun, real quick. So, who was it that said, by any means necessary?
Malcolm X.
Thank you, sir.
I manifested this.
You sure did. So, I want to ask another question. Pretty simple, pretty easy. There was an African-American man that was killed in his driveway, shot by a rifle. White man killed him for executing and looking for voting rights for African-Americans. What was his name? Who was the African-American shot in the early... Thank you, ma'am. Medgar Evers, yes. Yes. Now,
This is a big question.
this is the big one. Okay?
This is the finale.
2,386 people died on the Titanic. Who can name them?
All
the above, yes.
All the men.
Yeah. No, I'm going to ask another question. This is part of the issue. Part of the things that we focus on, and one of the things we focus on, this is really difficult because there are a lot of women in the room, but this is very difficult. So, I have a number, and I will see whoever comes closest without going over. So, part of the stuff we do inside of ECCR, the level at which we go to. The science of eugenics started years ago. And the practice of eugenics exploited and used African American bodies as a racial cleansing tool, primarily. Today, the science is known as, or science is not known as, the science is used primarily in the attitude of Planned Parenthood. Not to say anything bad about Planned Parenthood, but that's a reality. So, abortion is the #1 killer of African American people annually. How many African American lives do not exist on an annual basis because of abortion?
100,000.
Beg pardon?
100,000.
Annually.
Oh, probably a million.
No? How many people do you think are aborted? African American people are aborted every year.
380,000.
No, not that high. It's a 6-figure number. So we can lower it down there. Anybody get any?
150,000.
Yes.
Wow.
200,000.
No, actually, I'm maybe 650.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
500,000?
Huh?
500,000?
No, these are some really good numbers. No.
75,000.
I'll tell you the number, and then we'll go forward to the next question. 3,400 people. Now, again, this is nothing to say about women's rights or anything else. You're on Planned Parenthood. That's not the issue. The issue, part of what we talk about in ECCR, is if we can see a pathology through history and time and identify the weight of that pathology in current day. It doesn't make a difference how you feel about the science or the political or anything else. It's the numbers over a period of time and the reason behind science. It's hard. It's really hard to have that kind of conversation. That's about week 10 or 11 after 14 weeks. So, another question. Very easy. Can anybody name the death place of the woman who was married to the man who had the dream?
Who had the what? The dream.
Name the death place of the woman who was married to the man who had the dream.
Alabama.
That's where she rests.
Montgomery, Alabama.
That's where she rests. Actually, died in Mexico, but she was later brought back. A new question. A new question. Let's see if anybody get this right. Yeah, we all get jacket. Let me get this right. Okay, I got everybody's a hamburger, not a jacket. Okay. So, what does the acronym BLAAC stand for?
Black Lives and Allies. Black Lives and Allies.
Okay. It's a tie. I'll tear it in pieces. The irony of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, both presidents that were killed. Both of them supported civil rights in African Americans as it's been taught to us. What was the name of the president that succeeded both presidents? Thank you.
You're the big winner!
We have the surveys that are out. Hopefully we'll pick those up. Hopefully we didn't do anything with them. But everybody, thank you. We're going to do this again next year. And ideally, when we contact you, we're going to look for organizations of people who want to partner with us to expand this into another. I believe it's a 2-day event. I believe we can have the right conversations, we can do the breakouts, and we can conclude and do the right things for the county. So ideally, watch your email when it comes up next year. Please see if you can be part of the party. Thank you for being here. Day's over.